Chapter 1098. In the dark secret chamber, Yun Yao sat cross-legged on the frigid jade bed. She was meditating with her eyes closed. Yun Zhongqi stood in the corner with his hands behind his back. He stared at the star chart on the wall and waited silently. After about 4 hours, a dazzling golden light suddenly penetrated the secret chamber's defensive formation and flew into the secret chamber. Swoosh! The golden light landed in the middle of the secret chamber and revealed the figure of a burly man. He was a middle-aged man in a purple robe with a wide dark golden cape draped over his shoulders. His snow-white hair was tied up by a dark golden dragon's tendon and draped behind his head. He looked dignified. His facial features were as tough and resolute as a knife, and his eyes were as vast as the starry sky. Yun Zhongqi sensed this person's arrival and immediately turned to look at him. After seeing the purple-robed man's face clearly, Yun Zhongqi hurriedly stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Palace Master." There was no doubt that this mysterious and powerful purple-robed man was the Palace Master of the monarch residence. The Palace Master looked at Yun Zhongqi calmly and said in a dignified voice, "When I left back then, I left behind a spirit summoning tablet. You can ask me to help you once when you're in danger. Now that I've fulfilled my promise, you can tell me what you want." Yun Zhongqi nodded and said solemnly, "Palace Master, I had no choice but to use the spirit summoning tablet. I'm sorry to have to trouble you. I'm asking you to help me tonight because my daughter, Yun Yao, has indeed encountered a problem that we can't solve." After saying that, he pointed at Yun Yao who was lying on the frigid jade bed. The Palace Master turned to look at Yun Yao. After seeing her face clearly, he immediately frowned. "Has Yun Yao been demonized?" Yun Zhongqi nodded again and explained to the Palace Master, "Palace Master, when the Demon King kidnapped my daughter, he brought her back to the Heavenly Devil Palace and used an ancient Demon Dao secret technique." After hearing the entire story, the Palace Lord's frown deepened and his gaze turned even gloomier. "As I expected, the Demon Emperor's target is the Neptunian Divine Pearl," he murmured to himself as killing intent flashed through his eyes. A worried expression appeared on Yun Zhongqi's face, and he said in a solemn voice, "Palace Lord, the Demon Monarch has transformed me into the Blood God's son, and I've become like this. There has never been such a precedent in history, and we are all helpless. 21 years ago, my daughter lost her life. It was you who saved her and gave her a new life. Now that something like this has happened, only you can save her. This junior begs you." After he finished speaking, Yun Zhongqi cupped his fists and bowed deeply to the Mansion Lord. The Palace Lord looked at Yun Yao expressionlessly and said calmly, "Yun Yao, even if Yun Yao has become like this, I can still save her and help her regain her original appearance. Even if she has been transformed into a Blood God's son, all I need to do is undo the seal on the Neptunian Divine Pearl and use its power to purify her demonic body and bloodline. However, you should remember what I told you after saving her in the past." Yun Zhongqi let out a huge sigh of relief inside when he heard that. However, he was still rather hesitant. He asked, "Palace Lord, are you still going to take my daughter away in the end?" "That's right," the Palace Lord said in a dignified voice. "From the day she was reborn, she was no longer just the young Palace Lord of the Cloud Soul Palace. She had another mission as well. In a year at most, I will leave the Central Plain with her and go to a distant place." Yun Zhongqi frowned and pleaded with a troubled look on his face. "Mansion Master, ever since my daughter married Tianqing, we've been through a great ordeal. They've been through so many life-threatening situations, and they've always been apart more than together. If you want to take my daughter away, she definitely won't allow it with her personality. I beg you, Palace Lord, to give them 2 more years and let them be together for 2 more years." The Palace Lord said expressionlessly, "There's no room for discussion. As for how you're going to convince them, that's your problem." Yun Zhongqi's face was filled with helplessness as he sighed. The Palace Lord waved his hand and said, "Yun Zhongqi, I'm going to save Yun Yao. Wait outside. Don't let anyone disturb me." "Yes, Palace Lord." Yun Zhongqi clasped his hands and bowed. He could only leave the secret room and wait outside. The secret room fell silent again. Only the Palace Lord and Yun Yao remained. The Palace Lord strode over to the glacial jade bed and sent out a streak of golden light with a wave of his hand. Whoosh! The golden light flew into Yun Yao's head and immediately silenced her soul. She fell into a deep slumber. Her body fell limply, and she lay on the glacial jade bed without moving at all. Afterwards, the Palace Lord waved his hands with lightning-like speed. He formed a profound seal and cast out an ancient seal. 99 ancient golden characters surged out of his palms and drilled into Yun Yao's forehead like flowing water. The 99 golden characters with mysterious power entered the depths of her head and enveloped the Neptunian divine pearl. Swish! 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 The many mysterious characters revolved around the Neptunian divine pearl and quickly danced around it, releasing tremendous power. The invisible seals on the Neptunian divine pearl were removed layer by layer very soon. 10 seconds later, all 33 seals were removed. The Neptunian divine pearl's power was released, and it immediately flew out of Yun Yao's head. Swish! The Neptunian divine pearl hovered in the air as it pulsed with devastating power. It shone with dazzling, icy blue light. The icy blue light enveloped Yun Yao's body, making her look dreamy and blurry. The palace lord waved his hands sternly and continued to cast a technique with his soul. He formed a profound seal and sent it into the Neptunian divine pearl. The Neptunian divine pearl revolved and shone with icy blue light as it rapidly shrank. Unknowingly, 15 minutes passed. The entire Neptunian divine pearl had actually melted, turning into an extremely dense ball of icy blue light. This was a terrifying power that could destroy the world. Aside from that, there was a strand of dark purple mist within the icy blue light. The palace lord stared at the ball of blue light and murmured, "A fragment of the goddess Yaoguang's soul is sealed within the Neptunian divine pearl. If I release it and fuse it with Yun Yao, I'll be able to purify Yun Yao's demonic body and bloodline, as well as give her a sliver of the goddess Yaoguang's divine power. At that time, not only will she recover her original appearance, but her strength will also skyrocket with the goddess's legacy." As he said that, he continued to cast a secret technique, controlling the strand of dark purple mist to separate from the ball of icy blue light. Swish! The dark purple mist flew out of the ball of light and turned into a purple figure that was half a meter tall. This was a beautiful goddess with peerless beauty. She was like a fairy from the 9 heavens. Her appearance and appearance were actually 80% similar to Yun Yao. Clearly, this was a fragment of the goddess Yaoguang's soul. When the palace lord saw the purple figure of the goddess, he immediately frowned. His face darkened as he murmured to himself, How can this be? Even if the goddess Yaoguang's 3 souls have been destroyed, there should still be 7 fragments left. Red, orange, yellow, green, purple? This is the goddess Yaoguang's 7th fragment? Thinking up to there, he smiled bitterly and sighed. You really are a goddess after all. Yaoguang, oh Yaoguang, I never thought that you would still have something up your sleeves even after your death. You actually separated the 7 fragments and sealed them separately. I've done everything I could, taking every conceivable possibility into account, but I could only find your 7th fragment. It looks like apart from this Neptunian divine pearl, there are 6 other divine pearls in the world that seal your 6 fragments. Chapter 1099. The palace master was silent for a moment before he continued to cast the spell. Under his control, the purple figure of the goddess descended from the sky and entered Yun Yao's body. It gradually merged with her soul. An hour later, the goddess soul and Yun Yao's soul merged perfectly. Her aura changed instantly. She became more holy and dignified, just like a goddess. The palace master cast the spell expressionlessly. He controlled the ball of ice blue light that could destroy heaven and earth. It turned into a small stream and entered Yun Yao's body. The process was very slow. He had to cast the spell carefully. There could not be any mistakes. After all, the power of the ice blue light was too terrifying. Yun Yao's body could not withstand it. If she was not careful, her body would be destroyed. Time passed by quietly. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours had passed. 10 hours later, all the ice blue light entered Yun Yao's body and spread to her limbs and bones. Then, the holy, pure, powerful, and mysterious ice blue light quickly dispelled the demonic power and purified her bloodline. The black gas in her skin faded at a visible speed. She regained her jade-like luster. Her dark purple lips became lighter and lighter. Soon, the black color faded and returned to its original pink color. Her silver hair was also fading at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning into a glossy black. Most importantly, her 2-meter-tall body was also shrinking and becoming slender. Soon, the demonic characteristics on her body disappeared. She returned to her original appearance. She was still the beautiful, peerless, and holy fairy who was like a goddess from the 9 heavens. The palace master stood in front of the ice jade bed.
He only stopped casting the spell when he saw that she had returned to her original appearance and that the surging power in her body had calmed down.
He observed silently for a moment. When he saw that Yun Yao was fine and that her condition was stable, he sent a voice transmission to Yun Zhongqi, who was outside the secret room.
"Come in."
Yun Zhongqi had been waiting outside the door for 10 hours. He waited from midnight until late in the morning. His heart was filled with anxiety and worry.
When he heard the palace master's voice, he heaved a sigh of relief.
He quickly opened the stone door and entered the secret room. After entering the secret room, he anxiously looked at the corner of the secret room.
Seeing that Yun Yao had returned to her original appearance and was wrapped in a layer of light blue light, he heaved a sigh of relief.
"Manor head, has my daughter's problem been resolved?" The palace master nodded slightly and said calmly, "She's fine now. However, she will be in a deep sleep for half a month to gradually integrate the power of the divine orb. When she awoke naturally, her strength would skyrocket and reach an even higher realm. A year later, I will come to Cloud Spirit Palace again and take her away." Yun Zhongqi was originally filled with joy and relief, but when he heard this, the smile on his face quickly disappeared. However, he could only cup his fists and bow. His tone was solemn as he said, "Junior understands. Thank you for saving me, Lord Manor Head." The mansion master did not pay any attention to him. His body turned into a beam of golden light, pierced through the secret chamber, and disappeared into the sky. Yun Zhongqi was stunned for a moment before he left the secret chamber to report the good news to Ji Tianqing and the others. Miracle Dr. Bailey, Ji Tianqing, and Bailey Ningsu were resting in their respective residences. Although they were resting, the three of them were worried about Yun Yao's safety. They could not fall asleep or cultivate in peace.
When they heard the news from the guards, the three of them hurriedly left their residences and rushed to the main hall of Cloud Spirit Palace. When the three of them entered the main hall, they saw Yun Zhongqi sitting in the middle of the hall and sipping tea with a smile on his face. Seeing that he was in a good mood, everyone's eyes lit up. They had a feeling that things had gone smoothly. Before Miracle Dr. Bailey sat down, he hurriedly asked, "Zhongqi, how is Yao Yao's situation? Has she been saved?" Ji Tianqing also asked with concern, "Father-in-law, has Yao Yao's problem been resolved?" Yun Zhongqi nodded slightly and said with a smile, "That's right. A peerless powerhouse saved Yao Yao. He has already removed the demonic qi from her body and purified her demonic body and bloodline. This is a blessing in disguise for Yao Yao. Not only has she recovered her original appearance, but her strength has also skyrocketed." Hearing his words, Ji Tianqing and Miracle Dr. Bailey, the father and daughter pair, smiled excitedly. Everyone hurriedly urged Yun Zhongqi and dragged him to the secret room to check on Yun Yao's situation. After a while, everyone entered the secret room and saw Yun Yao sleeping on the ice jade bed. Seeing that Yun Yao had indeed recovered her original appearance and her strength and aura had become stronger, everyone was completely relieved. Ji Tianqing secretly released his divine soul energy to check on Yun Yao's mind. He found that the blue pearl in her mind had disappeared. He frowned and thought for a while. He vaguely guessed the reason and thought to himself, "The pearl in Yao Yao's mind is the same as my heaven-mending pearl.
They are both divine items. Now that the pearl has disappeared, did that peerless powerhouse borrow the power of the pearl to help Yao Yao recover her original appearance? That pearl is mysterious and powerful. It contains a power that can destroy heaven and earth. What kind of powerhouse is able to refine it? The strength of a soul-refining realm cultivator is definitely not enough. At the very least, it has to be a supreme primordial soul realm cultivator, right?" Thinking of this, he sent a voice transmission to Yun Zhongqi and asked, "Father-in-law, can you tell me who the peerless powerhouse that saved Yao Yao is?" Yun Zhongqi was talking to Miracle Dr. Bailey and Bailey Ningsu. They were chatting happily and their faces were full of smiles. Suddenly, when he heard Ji Tianqing's voice transmission, his body shook and the smile on his face disappeared. He found an excuse and asked Miracle Dr. Bailey and Bailey Ningsu to leave the secret room. When only he, Ji Tianqing, and Yun Yao were left in the secret room, he said with a serious face, "Tianqing, I already knew that this matter couldn't be hidden from you. However, I can't reveal the identity of that peerless powerhouse for now. Maybe you will have the chance to know in the future." Hearing him say this, Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and thought to himself, "There are only 2 or 3 known primordial soul supremes in the world. The only people who would save Yao Yao are the Emperor and the Palace Lord. If the Emperor didn't save her,
Then it must be the palace lord.
Yun Zhongqi sighed and continued, Tianqing, there's something I have to tell you. You have to be mentally prepared. Ji Tianqing saw his strange expression and had a bad feeling.
He nodded and said, Father-in-law, please tell me.
Yun Zhongqi said in a low voice, 21 years ago, Yao Yao died when she was born. Your mother-in-law took out a Nirvana divine crystal and barely managed to extend Yao Yao's life for a few months. At the critical moment, that peerless powerhouse came to Cloud's spirit palace and used a divine item to save Yao Yao, allowing Yao Yao to be reborn. However, that peerless powerhouse had a condition. 20 years later, he had to take Yao Yao away from Zhongzhou and go to an extremely distant place to complete an extremely important task. Last night, that peerless powerhouse mentioned this again and only gave me 1 year. Chapter 1100. In a year's time, he will take Yao Yao and leave Zhong State? Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and revealed a worried expression. His expression became serious. Yun Zhongqi nodded silently and said calmly, 21 years ago, when he saved Yao Yao, I agreed to his conditions. No one can go against his wishes, so we must fulfill this condition. In a year's time, Yao Yao will also be taken away by him. After a pause, he said sincerely, Tianqing, you and Yao Yao still have a year's time. You must cherish it. Ji Tianqing nodded and said firmly, Father-in-law, don't worry. There's still a year's time. Perhaps things will take a turn for the better. I will do everything I can to keep Yao Yao here. Yun Zhongqi shook his head and said bleakly, Tianqing, I know you are the #1 genius of Zhong State and can create countless miracles. However, a year's time is too short. That peerless expert's strength is beyond our imagination. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly to express his understanding. He sighed inwardly, after all, he is the #1 expert of the continent. He is someone who stands at the pinnacle of martial arts in Tianxian continent. Although he knew that the will of that expert could not be resisted, he did not give up. However, he would never give up or accept his fate. He would do his best to protect his wife. After a moment of silence, Yun Zhongqi continued, Tianqing, Yao Yao is already safe and sound. However, she still needs to sleep for half a month before she can wake up naturally. Once she wakes up, her strength will reach an even higher realm. You don't need to stay here and delay your cultivation. Go back to the Monarch Manor first. We will take good care of Yao Yao. If there are any changes or news, we will inform you immediately. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment. Half a month was indeed a long time, so he nodded in agreement. All right, father-in-law, I will take my leave first. He bowed to Yun Zhongqi, then turned and left the secret room. Then, he bid farewell to Bailey Ningsu and Bailey Dr. Bailey and left Cloud Soul Palace as fast as lightning. Half a day later, he returned to Central State City. After returning to the Monarch Mansion, he did not return to Tianqing Palace. Instead, he went straight to Yunshao Palace to look for Long Yunshao. He entered Yunshao Palace. Under the lead of the guards, he entered the back garden. In the back garden, hundreds of flowers were in full bloom. The forest was dense, and there was also a small lake and a bamboo forest swaying in the wind. The environment was very elegant. There was a quaint and elegant pavilion in the middle of the lake. There were 8 maids standing around the pavilion. There was a guqin placed in the middle of the pavilion, and a beautiful woman wearing a brocade dress was plucking the strings. The sound of the zither was crisp and pleasing to the ear, melodious and mellow, causing one's mind to be clear and refreshed. Ji Tianqing recognized her with a single glance. She was the heavenly consort Suwen. Her hair was combed into a bun, and she wore a phoenix coronet and a golden buyao. In addition, the son of heaven, Long Yunshao, was also sitting in the pavilion. He was leisurely sipping tea and listening to the melodious zither music. When the song ended, he revealed an expression of reminiscence. He gently put down the teacup and nodded with a smile. He clapped his hands and said, The heavenly consort's zither skills are becoming more and more exquisite. This song, the ballad of 10,000 rivers and mountains, made this monarch daydream. It was as if I was there, in the midst of 1,000 mountains and 10,000 rivers. I saw the great mountains and rivers of the human race's 9 regions. And Suwen's beautiful face revealed a faint smile. Her eyes were gentle and sweet as she said softly, Son of heaven, you've been working hard for the past few months. It's my honor and wish to be able to soothe your mind with the zither music. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows. He thought to himself, it seems like Long Yunxiao and Ensuan's relationship has improved. Although they're not in love, they're still respectful to each other. I didn't expect Ensuan to have also reached the Heaven Origin realm after not seeing her for a year. She's changed a lot. Her expression and temperament seem to have become gentler and more reserved. She's no longer as simple and stubborn as before. This is also good. Long Yunxiao and Ensuan aren't bad people. If they can get along peacefully and love each other, it'll be a good thing for everyone.
At this time, a guard walked out of the pavilion and respectfully reported, "Reporting to your majesty, Imperial Prince Tianqing has come to visit."
Long Yunxiao and Ensuan were both stunned. They quickly stopped talking and turned to look outside the pavilion. Ji Tianqing walked into the pavilion. He calmly cupped his hands and greeted, "Greetings, son of heaven, heavenly consort." Long Yunxiao and Ensuan quickly stood up and returned the greeting. They exchanged a few pleasantries with Ji Tianqing. After both parties were seated, Long Yunxiao asked, "Tianqing, how's Yao Yao?" He asked about Yun Yao's situation as soon as they met. Ji Tianqing was stunned for a moment. He slightly turned his head to look at Ensuan. Ensuan's expression didn't change.
Her eyes were still calm and gentle.
She didn't feel conflicted because of this. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing realized that she had indeed changed a lot. He said to Long Yunxiao, "Yao Yao's problem has been solved. She even profited from the disaster. Her strength has greatly increased." "There's actually such a good thing? Then this monarch is relieved." Long Yunxiao's face was full of surprise. He asked, "Tianqing, then why did you come to find this monarch today?" Ji Tianqing glanced at Ensuan and calmly said, "It's still the same thing as last time.
It's about the Western Wasteland." He didn't need to say anything else.
Long Yunxiao immediately understood. He turned his head to look at Ensuan and said, "Heavenly consort, this monarch and Tianqing have important matters to discuss. You may leave."
Ensuan bowed and said, "Understood."
When she walked to Ji Tianqing's side, she stopped and bowed to Ji Tianqing.
With a sincere expression, she apologized. "Imperial Prince Tianqing, several months ago, this consort heard news from the Yangon region that you had gone to the Chenkuan sect and had some conflicts with them. Those deacons and elders of our sect are all frogs in a well. They've never seen the world.
They unintentionally offended you. Please don't take it to heart." Ji Tianqing was stunned.
He didn't expect her to already know about this matter.
She even went out of her way to apologize.
Seeing her bow and apologize, he waved his hand and said with a smile, "Heavenly consort, your words are too serious.
Your sect master is a reasonable person.
He's a wise and far-sighted person.
As for the small conflict between me and your sect, it's already in the past. Naturally, I won't take it to heart."
Hearing him say this, Ensuan clearly breathed a sigh of relief. She smiled and nodded. "Then this consort will represent our sect to thank Imperial Prince Tianqing for his magnanimity."
After saying this, she led the maids out of the pavilion. When only Ji Tianqing and Long Yunxiao were left in the pavilion, Ji Tianqing opened his mouth to speak. "A year ago when I left Central State City, I was ambushed by Murong Lingfeng and the 4 great dragon protectors. I fought back and killed them all. Now that a year has passed, what's the situation in Central State?
What's the Murong family's reaction?"
Long Yunxiao curled his lips and revealed a playful smile. "Back then, this monarch had said that after you left, this monarch would focus on dealing with the Murong family. The matter of Murong Lingfeng being killed is no longer a secret. Countless powerhouses and powers know that it was you who did it. However, the Murong family can't find you. No matter how angry they are, it's useless. Moreover, in this year, this monarch has suppressed the Murong family to the point where it's difficult for them to move. They're already powerless to take revenge on you. I'm also unable to provide any help to Long Zai Tian." Speaking up to here, he frowned and thought for a moment. Then he said in a low voice, "However, the Murong family's patriarch, Murong Zhang, is an extremely shrewd person. He can't be underestimated. No matter how difficult the Murong family situation is, you still have to be on your guard. Be careful of his revenge.
After all, that old man is a powerhouse at the 5th level of the spirit refinement realm.
If he disregards everything to take revenge for his son, your situation will be worrying." Chapter 1101. After understanding the Murong family situation, Ji Tianqing was relieved. The current Murong family was no longer a threat to him, so he didn't need to worry about them. He then asked Long Yunxiao, Son of Heaven, you've been secretly observing the divine general of the West Wilderness for many years, so you must have information on him, right? Can you give me a copy? Long Yunxiao raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, It seems that I didn't guess wrong, the divine general of the West Wilderness offended you quite a bit? I can give you information on Yu Tianhong, but you have to tell me, what kind of grudge do you have between you two? Ji Tianqing didn't want to reveal this matter, but Long Yunxiao insisted, so he could only tell the truth. When I was returning to the central region from the northern desert, I was chased by several demon commanders. I had no choice but to take a detour to the West Wilderness, and was chased by the demon commanders, so I fled to Mang City. I told him my identity and purpose, and asked him to open the city gate and help me force the demon commanders back. But he refused to open the gate, and deliberately pretended not to know me, and even framed me as a demon spy. Looking at his reaction, he obviously recognized me, and deliberately wanted to kill me. Fortunately, I had another opportunity, so I was able to escape the demon commander's pursuit and safely return to the central region. Long Yunxiao suddenly realized, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He sneered, This Yu Tianhong is really abominable, he deserves to die. Even if the demon race was in front of him, he still didn't care about the righteousness of the human race, and insisted on getting rid of you for the third prince. Ji Tianqing nodded, and said in a low voice, Long Zai-Tian has always wanted to kill me. I will remember this grudge, and will definitely take my revenge. However, Long Zai-Tian's status is not ordinary, and his power is deeply rooted. I can only follow the vine to find the melon, and slowly investigate and plan. And that's good. Long Yunxiao nodded in agreement, and solemnly warned, Long Zai-Tian's power is slightly stronger than mine, and his methods are sinister and despicable. You must be careful. Finished speaking, he took out a jade slip from his spatial ring and gave it to Ji Tianqing. This jade slip records Yu Tianhong's life information and information. Take it and slowly study it. If you are ready to take revenge and begin to act, if you have any difficulties or needs, feel free to tell this monarch. This monarch will definitely do his best to help. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly, accepted the jade slip, and said goodbye to him. After leaving Cloudy Palace, he went straight back to Tianqing Palace. After returning to the study room, he took out the jade slip that Long Yunxiao had given him and carefully read the information within it. He saw that there were tens of thousands of words of information recorded in the jade slip, all of which were about Yu Tianhong's deeds. Yu Tianhong was over 170 years old. He was at the 5th level of the spirit refining realm, and was the divine general in charge of guarding the West Wilderness. The Yu family's clan was located in River Origin City, one of the 100 cities in the Central Plains. They were extremely wealthy and powerful. Back when Ji Tianqing and the 9 geniuses were fighting for the position of Heavenly Stellar Region Lord, one of them was a young genius called Yu Zhengfei. This person was Yu Tianhong's eldest son and the most outstanding talent of the Yu family's younger generation. In addition, the jade slip also recorded some of the important events that had happened to Yu Tianhong and the Yu family in the past 100 years. Through these events, Ji Tianqing understood the Yu family's power in detail, as well as Yu Tianhong's nature and methods. After reading the information in the jade slip, he couldn't help but have a question in his mind. With Yu Tianhong's strength and the Yu family's power in River Origin City, they could be considered as one of the top 10 clans in the human race. If there wasn't enough temptation and reason, Yu Tianhong wouldn't have to work so hard for Long Zai-Tian. Could it be that Long Zai-Tian also planted a divine venomous goo in Yu Tianhong? It's very possible. Even Duanmu Huang and Murong Zhang were implanted with divine venomous goo by Long Zai-Tian. Yu Tianhong wouldn't be able to escape. Thinking of this, his eyes flashed with a cold light as he muttered to himself, Long Zai-Tian, one day, I will announce to the world that you used divine venomous goo to control the 2 clans and the divine general. I will report this to the emperor and destroy your reputation and consign you to eternal damnation. At this moment, footsteps suddenly came from outside the study room. A guard walked to the door and reported respectfully. Reporting to the region lord, the prince of the water clan, Tai Yi, has come to visit. Suddenly hearing this news, Ji Tianqing was startled. Tai Yi? This guy has always been arrogant and cold. Why would he take the initiative to visit me? He suddenly remembered something and revealed a playful smile as he guessed. Could it be that he's here for that matter? Then, he put away the jade slip and left the study room. When he walked into the guest hall, he saw Tai Yi standing in the middle of the hall,
expressionlessly thinking about something. Tai Yi was still wearing a luxurious purple robe and a golden crown, his aura noble and resolute. After seeing Ji Tianqing, he cupped his hands in greeting and said calmly, "Greetings to Prince Tianqing." Ji Tianqing returned the greeting and asked, "Tai Yi, how come you have time to visit me today? Has the matter of the Water Clan been resolved?" Tai Yi nodded slightly and said with a serious face, "Currently, the Demon Clan's army is still gathering at the coastal border and invading our sea area day and night. However, the Demon Clan's army is like a group of dragons without a leader. Even if they attack day and night, they can only wear each other out and pull at each other. They can't attack deep into our sea area. Speaking of which, I have to thank you for this matter. The Demon Clan's army that attacked us was led by Demon Commander Blood Shura. After you killed Blood Shura, the Demon Clan hasn't chosen a new demon commander for the time being. The army is also like a group of dragons without a leader." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Although the Eastern Seas situation is not a problem for now, you still have to be vigilant. The Demon Clan's power is growing very quickly." Tai Yi nodded to show that he understood. He stared at him and said with a complicated tone, "When you first entered the Northern Desert, I was full of emotions and thought that you would never return. I didn't expect you to be so monstrous. You broke into the Northern Desert alone to save Yun Yao and came back alive. Even God Master He, you didn't have such courage and means like you. How did you do it?" Ji Tianqing chuckled and said, "It's a long story. Let's not talk about it. Let's talk about business. What do you want from me?" Tai Yi was silent for a while, then said with a serious tone, "We made a bet. If you could come back alive from the Northern Desert, I would be your bodyguard for a year. Now that you have done it, of course, I won't break my promise. Today, I'm here to fulfill my promise. From today onwards, I will be by your side as your personal bodyguard for a period of 1 year." Ji Tianqing was startled when he heard Tai Yi say that. He smiled and waved his hand. "Tai Yi, don't be so serious. It was just a joke. Don't take it seriously." Chapter 1102. Tai Yi frowned slightly when he saw that Ji Tianqing did not take the matter seriously and treated it as a joke. He looked at Ji Tianqing firmly and said, "As the heir to the imperial court of the water race, I will keep my word. I will not go back on my words." Ji Tianqing stopped smiling when he saw that Tai Yi was serious. He said seriously, "All right, let's not talk about being a follower. Let's not talk about this anymore. If you're willing, let's be friends and call each other brothers. What do you think?" Tai Yi was stunned and looked at him with a complicated expression. He cupped his hands and praised from the bottom of his heart, "Brother Tianqing, I had some opinions about you in the past and had some unpleasant experiences with you. That's because I'm proud and arrogant, and I'm jealous of your talent. Now that I've gotten to know you, I've seen your extraordinary talent and noble character, which makes me admire you greatly. This monarch has never made friends, much less sworn brothers, but you are an exception. From now on you are my brother. If you need my help in the future, I will not hesitate to help." Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "If that's the case, I'll thank you first." Tai thought for a moment and said in a low voice, "Brother Tianqing, I heard that you killed Murong Lingfeng and the 4 masters when you left Zhongzhou. You were not in Zhongzhou for the past year. The Murong family could not find you even if they wanted to take revenge. But now that you are back, the Murong family will not let you go. You have to be prepared. If you want to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, this monarch will certainly lend you a hand. The Imperial Court of the Water Race has a huge network and spies in Zhongzhou. It will be easy to deal with the Murong family. Don't worry, if the Imperial Court of the Water Race investigates, I will take responsibility. I will let the Imperial Court of the Water Race negotiate with the Imperial Court of the Water Race. I will not let you take the blame." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said with a smile, "Tai Yi, thank you for your kindness. I have just returned to Zhongzhou. I will observe the current situation and then make a plan. As for the Murong family, I don't care about them at all. They can't threaten me anyway." The Murong family was nothing to worry about. What was really troublesome for me was the power behind the Murong family. That was my real target. If we deal with the Murong family now, we will only alert the enemy and make them take precautions. Tai's eyes immediately lit up. He nodded solemnly and said, "That's right. I've heard about this a long time ago. The Murong clan is working for the 3rd prince of the human imperial court. A few years ago, Murong Lingfeng had visited this monarch several times and tried every possible means to curry favor with this monarch, wanting to rope this monarch in. At that time, I knew that Murong Lingfeng was working for third Prince Long Zai Tian. However, this monarch despises Murong Lingfeng, that sissy who is neither a man nor a woman, the most. This monarch didn't give him any face and had the guards chase him away several times. Hearing the word sissy, Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a strange smile. Tai continued, Brother Tianqing, third Prince Long Zai Tian is not someone to be underestimated. He is ambitious and ruthless. His methods are very sinister and despicable. If you want to deal with him, you have to be careful and make ample preparations. This monarch can help you gather information and investigate the third prince. This will allow you to know yourself and your enemy. It will be easier to deal with him. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, That's good. Then I'll leave it to you. Tai said solemnly, Leave this to me. I'll give you an answer within half a month at most. Then, the two talked about the situation in the imperial court. After a quarter of an hour, Tai bid farewell and left Tianqing Palace. Ji Tianqing had just walked out of the guest hall and was about to return to his room. Another guard hurried over and respectfully presented a letter. Reporting to Region Lord, this is a letter sent by the guards of Xingyu Village. They asked this subordinate to present it to you. Xingyu Village. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and thought to himself, Is it Kuan-Wu or Cuckoo? Why don't we meet and talk about it? He took the letter back to his room and opened it. He saw a few lines of beautiful handwriting on the letter. It was Cuckoo's handwriting. Brother Tianqing, Brother Kuan-Wu and I have to return to the imperial court. The situation is urgent, so we didn't have time to say goodbye to you in person. Please forgive us. Several demon marshals led hundreds of thousands of demon army to attack the borders of Shihuang. They attacked cities and plundered lands along the way, slaughtering the people of the demon race. The war is urgent. Brother Kuan-Wu has to return to the imperial court and lead the army with father. I also have to go back to cultivate and comprehend secret techniques. The situation in Zhongzhou is not peaceful either. Brother Tianqing, you must take care of your body and be careful. Don't worry. Cuckoo will work hard to improve her strength and become as strong as you as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing looked at these beautiful words, and Ku's beautiful face appeared in his mind. Her charming and cute smiling face. He could see Ku's determination and her longing and reluctance to part with him from the words. After a long time, he put the letter away and smiled. He sighed and said to himself, Cuckoo has finally grown up. Then, he gave some instructions to the guards and entered the secret room to cultivate. He had just reached the second level of the spirit cultivation realm not long ago and his strength was not stable yet. He had to cultivate hard to strengthen his foundation. Most importantly, he had always been thinking about the 9 swords of the burial of heaven. Since the burial of heaven taught him the 9 swords of the burial of heaven, he had only cultivated the first move, the sword drawing style. The power of the sword drawing style was far beyond all the trump cards he had cultivated. It showed him the power of the 9 swords of the burial of heaven. Now that he had settled down, he couldn't wait to continue cultivating the second move. He sat cross-legged in the secret room and communicated with the burial of heaven with his divine soul. He asked, Burial of heaven, I plan to cultivate in seclusion for 10 days. Can you teach me the second move of the burial of heaven? The burial of heaven was sleeping in the divine sword, quietly recovering its strength. After a while it said in a low and serious tone, Teaching you the second move is of course no problem, but you have to remember, don't bite off more than you can chew. You have to do it step by step. Also, cultivating the 9 swords of the burial of heaven is not suitable in a secret room. It is difficult to use. I suggest you sacrifice your divine soul and enter the Kenshin's tomb to cultivate. Only then can you achieve twice the result with half the effort. Okay. Ji Tianqing nodded and followed its suggestion. His divine soul entered the Kenshin's tomb. Swoosh! His golden sword soul entered the Kenshin's tomb and appeared in the gray and cold wasteland. The sword soul quickly turned into a human and flew to the end of the wasteland, near the 18 tombstones. Then the burial of heaven said in a serious tone, The first move of the burial of heaven's 9 swords is the sword drawing style, and the second move is the sword piercing style. Although the name of this sword move is as ordinary and mediocre as the first move. But this is a sword that has been tempered thousands of times and merged with all the sword moves in the world. It is a divine sword that is simple. When this sword is used, a cold star illuminates the sky.
Chapter 1103. The second style, sword thrust, had more than 1,000 words.
It was mysterious and very obscure.
Ji Tianxing memorized the sword technique's mnemonic and listened attentively to Burial of Heaven's teachings.
With the experience of cultivating the sword drawing style, it was much easier for him to comprehend the mnemonic of the sword thrust style.
His soul studied in Kenshin's tomb for 4 days before he finally figured out the trick and method of the sword thrust style.
Then, he used his soul power to condense a sword and began to cultivate this sword technique. 10,000 swords as one.
Swish!
With a thrust of the sword, a cold light burst out, and the sword energy within 1,000 meters surged.
The power of this sword was extraordinary, but Ji Tianxing was not satisfied. He continued to draw and thrust the sword, practicing repeatedly.
At present, he was still at the beginning stage of cultivating the 9 swords of Burial of Heaven. He only had the form and did not have the charm of the sword intent.
There was no shortcut to cultivating this sword technique. Apart from extraordinary comprehension, he also needed to practice 1,000,000 times. As time passed, Ji Tianxing repeatedly cultivated the 2 sword techniques as if he did not know fatigue and forgot the passage of time. Unknowingly, 10 days had passed.
Originally, he only planned to cultivate in seclusion for 10 days, but he was immersed in cultivation and could not extricate himself.
He was still practicing the sword technique and constantly comprehending, reflecting, and improving it. When he was confused and puzzled, he would ask Burial of Heaven for advice. Burial of Heaven imparted his experience and gave him many opinions and suggestions, allowing him to quickly comprehend the sword technique's secrets and cultivate more smoothly. Soon, a month had passed. Ji Tianxing's soul continued to cultivate in Kenshin's tomb for a month before finally mastering the second style, sword thrust style.
He stood above the wasteland, holding a white sword condensed from his soul in his left hand and his right hand hanging by his side.
He looked ahead expressionlessly. He silently accumulated strength and nurtured his sword intent. A moment later, he suddenly drew his sword and attacked at lightning speed. Swish! The soul light sword was unsheathed and slashed diagonally from bottom to top, creating a shocking sword beam that was 100 meters long, slashing at the gray fog at the end of the wasteland. Swish! This sword was unparalleled in its sharpness. It truly had the power to tear apart the heavens and the earth. The sword light slashed into the hazy gray fog, immediately splitting open a huge crack in the gray fog, forming a 1,000-meter-long gully. Without waiting for the gray fog to heal and the empty ravine to be filled, Ji Tianxing continued to attack with his sword and used the second move. Piercing sword style. Swish! The divine soul-shaped sword of light pierced forward with terrifying power. Suddenly, an extremely sharp and condensed sword light pierced through the sky and disappeared. Almost at the same time, the cold light appeared in the gray fog 5 kilometers away. Shwa!
The dense gray fog was actually dispersed by the cold light, and a huge hole with a radius of 10 miles appeared.
The gray fog in that area actually disappeared into thin air, turning into a blank area. Moreover, the empty space created by Ji Tianxing's sword could not be healed. An invisible sword intent enveloped an area of 5 kilometers, preventing the gray fog from approaching. Ji Tianxing immediately raised his eyebrows, and his eyes shone brightly. He did not expect the power of the piercing sword style to be so terrifying. This was only used in Kenshin's tomb.
If he used it in the outside world, this sword would be able to pierce through any defense.
Even a soul-level Dharma treasure would not be able to block his sword.
In the future, if he advanced to the primordial soul stage, this sword would be able to pierce through the sky and see the galaxy beyond the heavens.
It is indeed powerful.
The piercing sword style uses all the strength and sword intent, condensing it to the limit, and breaking through a point. Its power is several times stronger than the drawing sword style.
Ji Tianxing murmured to himself, his heart filled with shock and emotion. At this moment, he suddenly caught a glimpse of something strange in the empty area of 5 kilometers. He hurriedly flew across the sky and flew to the empty area to observe carefully. He saw that the ground within 5 kilometers was covered in gray rock layers, which had experienced tens of thousands of years. It was simple and ancient. This area was empty, and there was nothing in it. However, Ji Tianxing discovered that there were many crisscrossing lines on the flat gray ground. Every line was a deep groove that was as wide as a palm. The marks were extremely sharp, as if they were drawn by sword qi. There are actually traces of sword qi on the ground? Could there have been an intense battle here? Ji Tianxing looked down at the ground from above and observed the hundreds of lines carefully. Soon,
He discovered that the lines were not messy and did not look like they were caused by an intense battle.
Someone had deliberately drawn them. Some of the lines were straight and spanned 5 kilometers. Some of the lines were curved and passed through countless lines, as if they were connected to some veins. After observing for a moment, Ji Tianqing was enlightened. I understand now. This is an array formation diagram. So that's how it is.
On the gray ground within 5 kilometers, the thousands of crisscrossing lines outlined an extremely mysterious and complicated array formation diagram. Furthermore, the array formation diagram drawn by the thousands of lines was only the tip of the iceberg, a very small part of the array formation. Even more lines and patterns were covered by the vast fog. Ji Tianqing tried a few more times, using the piercing sword style with all his might, wanting to break through the fog and open up more empty areas. However, when the cold light entered the fog, it disappeared, swallowed by the mysterious gray fog, unable to open up more areas. Strange, why would an array formation diagram appear in Kenshin's tomb? Could it be that Kenshin left it behind when he was alive? But that can't be right. Kenshin's tomb only appeared after Kenshin died. He couldn't have had a tomb when he was alive, right? Ji Tianqing stared at the array formation diagram on the ground, frowning as he pondered. The more he thought, the more puzzled he became. Thus, he hurriedly used his soul to send a message to Burial of Heaven for guidance. Burial of Heaven, I broke through the fog in Kenshin's tomb and found an array formation diagram on the ground. What's going on? For the first time, Burial of Heaven did not remain silent or hesitate. He subconsciously asked, What? You broke through the fog and saw the array formation diagram? Hearing his reaction, his tone full of doubt, Ji Tianqing was even more puzzled. Burial of Heaven, I just learned the piercing sword style and tried to use it once with all my strength. I actually broke through the fog within a radius of 10 miles. A formation diagram appeared on the ground, but it should be a corner of the entire diagram. I can't see any clues. You know the Kenshin's tomb the best. Don't tell me even you don't know? Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, I know a little more about Kenshin's tomb than you, but I can't say I understand it. After all, after Kenshin died, I have been in a deep sleep for 1,000 years. From the first day I entered Kenshin's tomb, it has always been like this. There is only a wasteland with a radius of a few hundred miles, surrounded by gray fog. I really don't know about the array formation diagram, and I have never heard Kenshin mention it. Of course, my memory is somewhat incomplete. After 1,000 years, I can't remember it clearly. Hearing it say this, Ji Tianqing vaguely understood some things. He thought to himself, it seems that Kenshin's tomb is not that simple. Chapter 1104. Ji Tianqing carefully observed for a long time, memorizing the lines and patterns of the nameless formation. Although he had a premonition that this huge and ancient formation definitely contained some secrets. But the Burial of Heaven knew nothing about this. He had no clue and could not find any clues. He could only put this matter aside for now and slowly study it in the future. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing's soul left Kenshin's tomb and returned to his body. He opened his eyes and ended his seclusion. Although he had been in seclusion for a month, he had been comprehending and cultivating the second style of the 9 swords of the Burial of Heaven. But his soul had been tempered, his martial arts realm had been consolidated, and his physical body had become stronger under the training of his magic power. Imperceptibly, his combat power had increased and became even more powerful. He got up and left the secret room and returned to his room. Not long after, the guard outside the door knew that he had come out of seclusion and quickly came to report the news. Congratulations on coming out of seclusion, Your Excellency. Your divine power has improved again. Reporting to Your Excellency, in the month you were in seclusion, a few princes came to visit you. Someone even sent you a jade scroll and an invitation. As the guard spoke, he took out a jade slip and a scarlet invitation card with golden lettering and handed it over to Ji Tianqing. Who sent it? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and reached out to take the jade scroll and invitation from the guard. He looked at them carefully. The guard replied respectfully, Your Excellency, the jade scroll was sent by the prince of the water clan, Tai. He asked me to personally hand it to you. As for the invitation, it was sent by someone half a month ago. The person who sent the letter did not announce his identity. He only said that you would understand after seeing the invitation. Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and waved his hand.
I understand. You may leave.
After the guard left the room, he stared at the jade scroll and invitation and muttered. The jade scroll sent by Tai should be related to Long Zitian.
But this invitation. Who sent it?
He picked up the invitation card and looked at it carefully. Opening the jade slip, he saw a few lines of bold and forceful words written on it. They were all common pleasantries. And the name of the invitation card was actually Long Zitian. Long Zitian actually invited Ji Tianqing to the Flying Dragon City as a guest to attend his 40th birthday banquet. After reading the invitation, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and muttered with a heart full of doubt. Did Long Zitian eat the wrong medicine? Or was his brain flooded with water? He obviously hates me to the bone and wants to kill me with his own hands. But he actually took the initiative to invite me to his birthday banquet. Could it be that he wanted to curry favor with me and take the opportunity to rope me in? No, I know his secret. Our hatred is irreconcilable. There is no way we can reconcile. What is this bastard trying to do? Ji Tianqing held the red invitation card and fell into deep thought and hesitation, unable to make up his mind. He never thought that Long Zitian would actually invite him to the birthday banquet at this time. This was too strange. After pondering for a moment, he suddenly remembered that the birthday banquet mentioned on the invitation card was tomorrow. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing hurriedly called for the guard outside and ordered, "Send someone to ask around the other princes. Who else received the invitation card to the third prince's birthday banquet?" The guard bowed and said yes, then quickly carried out the order. Ji Tianqing waited in the room and silently flipped through the invitation card. He continued to flip through it and saw that there was a slip of paper in the invitation card. He took out the slip of paper and looked at it. There was actually a sentence on it. The handwriting was like a dragon flying and phoenix flying, and it was quite imposing. Ji Tianqing, for my birthday banquet, I have invited all the noble families and young elites of the human race. As the #1 genius, you are naturally on the list. Of course, if you are timid and afraid, it's fine if you don't come. Anyway, I don't want to see you. Seeing the two sentences on the slip of paper, he immediately revealed a mocking sneer. Long Zitian, you are a prince of the imperial court in vain, yet you are so inferior and childish. Since you don't want to see me, then I have to go. So what if this is a conspiracy? You actually used such a clumsy method to goad me. I want to see what you want to do. If Long Zitian only invited him, he would naturally suspect that this was a banquet at Hongmen, or that Long Zitian had some despicable scheme. But Long Zitian had already said that he had invited all the noble families and young geniuses of the human race. Ji Tianqing wanted to take this opportunity to see which noble families of the human race had a close relationship with Long Zitian. Other than that, the Flying Dragon City was one of the 100 cities in the central continent, and was also the third prince's fief and headquarters. Ji Tianqing wanted to take the opportunity to enter the Flying Dragon City and see if he could find any clues or secrets of the third prince. In the past, he and Long Zitian had always been secretly attacking and fighting. This time, Long Zitian actually sent an invitation card in broad daylight. Clearly, he wanted to directly provoke him. How could he endure this? Of course he had to fight back. About 2 hours later, the guard returned to the door and respectfully reported. Reporting to the domain lord, this subordinate has already investigated the results. Other than you, most of the human race princes in the monarch mansion have received the third prince's birthday banquet invitation. Moreover, several princes have already left the monarch mansion and rushed to the Flying Dragon City to attend the banquet. After listening to the guard's report, Ji Tianqing knew what was going on, and was even more determined to attend the banquet. He waved his hand to dismiss the guard, and silently meditated in the room. A day passed quickly. Early in the morning of the second day, he left the monarch mansion alone, flew out of the central continent city, and rushed to the Flying Dragon City as fast as lightning. While he was flying, he was still recalling the information about the Flying Dragon City in his mind. The Flying Dragon City was located in the south of the central continent city, about 20,000 miles away. It was a bustling city with hundreds of years of history. The city had a radius of 100 miles, and there were dozens of towns under its jurisdiction, with more than 2 million people. Ever since the imperial court bestowed this ancient city to the third prince more than 10 years ago, this place had become his private territory. Most of his wealth, resources, and trump cards were in the Flying Dragon City. Of course, there were also many of his secrets and dirty secrets hidden in this city. Soon, 6 hours passed, and it was noon. Ji Tianqing flew continuously for 20,000 miles,
and finally arrived at the Flying Dragon City. Even from 100 miles away, he could see the ancient city on the vast plains. The tall city walls made of dark brown rock surrounded the square city, standing tall on the ground. In the center of the city, there was a huge pagoda that was 1,000 meters tall. It had a total of 99 floors, and its entire body was dark gold, looking very dignified and holy. At the top of the pagoda, there was a huge golden dragon statue, shining under the sunlight. Even from 100 miles away, one could clearly see the statue, the golden dragon with its wings spread out. Chapter 1105. Long Xiqian's ambition could be seen from the golden dragon statue on the pagoda in the city. He compared himself to a true dragon hiding in the abyss. He had been silently accumulating power, waiting for the right time to soar into the sky. After Ji Tianqing entered the Flying Dragon City, he rushed towards the Flying Dragon Palace while looking up at the pagoda in the center of the city. He sneered in his heart. A hidden dragon in the abyss, dreaming of soaring into the sky and seizing the position of emperor? Long Xiqian, if you didn't provoke me, you might really have a chance to defeat Long Yunxiao and seize the throne. But unfortunately, I will definitely not let you succeed. Your dream of becoming an emperor can only be fulfilled in your next life. An hour later, he strolled outside the Flying Dragon Palace. The Flying Dragon Palace was one of Long Xiqian's palaces, and also his true lair. The palace occupied a vast area and was extremely luxurious. Its entire body was resplendent in gold and jade, and it was extremely noble and imposing. Outside the wide palace gate, there was a divine dragon statue on the left and right, and 18 silver-armored guards were guarding it. On the 30-meter-tall gate, the words Flying Dragon Palace were written in gold. The palace was decorated with lanterns and colored banners, making the atmosphere seem festive. There was clamorous music coming from the Flying Dragon Palace. Obviously, countless guests had already arrived at the Flying Dragon Palace and were chatting happily inside. When Ji Tianqing walked towards the palace gate, there was still a line at the entrance. More than a dozen well-dressed and well-spoken leaders of wealthy families, as well as young talents and high spirits, were entering the Flying Dragon Palace one after another. These people all brought their attendants and guards, walked to the entrance, showed their invitations to the old butler guarding the door, and offered him a congratulatory gift. Only Ji Tianqing's extravagance was very shabby. He did not have a luxurious carriage or spirit beast, nor did he have any attendants or guards. When the crowd saw him coming to the banquet alone, they could not help but size him up a few times, revealing playful smiles, and secretly discussing with each other. Ji Tianqing ignored the strange gazes of those people, took out the invitation and handed it to the old butler, and offered him a congratulatory gift. He didn't prepare the so-called congratulatory gift in advance. He took out 10,000 spirit stones from his spatial ring at the last minute to make up the number. Every time the old steward accepted a gift, he would shout loudly that a certain person had come to congratulate him on his birthday and present him with gifts such as treasures and rare treasures. Most of the leaders and young talents of the wealthy families would offer valuable resources, treasures, and rare antiques. Even ordinary spirit stones, elixirs, magic tools, and other resources were bound to be astonishing. When it was Ji Tianqing's turn, the old housekeeper's expression changed. He frowned and looked at him with sharp eyes. Then, he shouted with a poker face, "Ji Tianqing, Territory Lord of Tianjin Region, is here to congratulate you on your birthday. Here is a gift of 10,000 spiritual stones." The moment the old steward shouted, all the guests outside the door stopped in their tracks, their faces full of astonishment. After everyone regained their senses, they all had complicated expressions on their faces as they looked at the entrance. Some people roared with laughter, some people discussed in disbelief, and some people had expressions of contempt and disdain as they whispered to each other. What did the old butler shout just now? Tianjin Region Lord? Ji Tianqing is here? Ji Tianqing? That's the youngest region lord, the #1 genius of our family? The crown prince of the monarch mansion? Wow! Even he is here to congratulate the third prince? It seems that the third prince has a wide circle of friends and has a wide range of connections. I heard the old butler say 10,000 spiritual stones? Did I hear wrongly? I heard it too. Ji Tianqing is here to congratulate the third prince and only brought 10,000 spiritual stones as a gift. Ha ha ha. Isn't this too funny? He is the region lord of Tianjin region. How can he be so stingy? Heh. This is going to be a good show. Ji Tianqing is obviously trying to embarrass the third prince. It seems that Ji Tianqing is not here with good intentions. All the guests discussed animatedly as they looked at Ji Tianqing with complicated expressions. After the old butler accepted the gift, he expressionlessly extended his hand and invited him into the palace. Ji Tianqing ignored everyone's strange gazes as he stepped through the door and entered the Flying Dragon Palace. Inside the door was a spacious courtyard. On the left was a beautiful garden with a pavilion, a small mountain, a small lake and a bamboo forest. Many young talents were gathered in groups of 3 to 5 as they strolled and chatted in the garden. On the right was a plaza where hundreds of guests were gathered. They were chatting and exchanging greetings with each other. The atmosphere was very lively. There were many white jade tea tables and tables placed around the plaza. On top of them were rich spirit fruits, pastries, spirit tea, wine and so on. They were for the guests to use as they pleased. Many young and beautiful maids were respectfully guarding the plaza, serving the guests at any time. It was now afternoon and everyone could move around as they pleased. Tonight's banquet was the main event. Ji Tianqing calmly walked through the plaza and headed straight for the main hall at the back of the plaza. That magnificent main hall was the main venue of tonight's birthday banquet. Of course, only those with noble status could enter the main hall. Ordinary disciples of aristocratic families could only wait in the plaza. When Ji Tianqing entered the main hall, there were already hundreds of people gathered in the hall. They sat on both sides of the main hall and were chatting in low voices. There were more than 40 people on the left side. More than 30 of them were the leaders of first-rate aristocratic families, and more than 10 of them were the city lords of prosperous cities. Of course, the 4 experts sitting at the very top were the most distinguished. They were the 4 region lords of the human race's 9 regions. They were all at the 2nd or 3rd level of the soul cultivation realm. On the right side of the main hall sat more than 50 people. They were all famous young talents of the central state and the imperial princes of the monarch residence. Ji Tianqing looked over and saw a few people he recognized. There were the 3 imperial princes, Ling Exin, Lu Zikong, and Lu Ziyuan. In addition, there was the chief disciple of Green Crane Valley Sword Faction, Di Jianqing, and the city lord of Smoke Wing City, Qian Shan Zhenwu. These 2 people had participated in the Heavenly Stellar Region Lord's election with him. They had interacted for a few days and knew each other. When Ji Tianqing sized up the crowd, everyone stopped talking and looked at him. Seeing him appear, Ling Exin, Lu Zikong, Lu Ziyuan, and the other 8 imperial princes were stunned. Their eyes were a little complicated. Many governors and realm masters who hadn't seen Ji Tianqing before frowned slightly as they sized him up with scrutinizing eyes. As for the famous young talents, they looked at him with burning eyes. Many of them had fighting spirits surging in their eyes as if they wanted to compete with him. After a while, everyone came back to their senses. Many leaders, city lords, and imperial princes stood up to greet him. Even 2 of the 4 domain lords stood up and greeted him respectfully. Those 2 were the region lords of the Yangon region and the horizontal water region. Ji Tianqing returned their greetings. After a few words of greeting, he sat down beside them. Chapter 1106. As the host, Long Zitian was not present. The people in the main hall could only exchange greetings and talk about some things in Zhongzhou. Some people talked about the recent situation in Zhongzhou. Only 2 of the 3 ancient families were left. The Murong family's forces had been suppressed by various forces and had been shrinking their defenses. Their forces had been weakened and they had become unusually low-key. The Murong family did not even send anyone to attend the 3rd prince's birthday banquet. Some people sighed. The Duanmu family had been destroyed and the Murong family had gradually withered. Only the Cloud Spirit Palace was still as powerful as before. When the Duanmu family's destruction was mentioned, many people secretly looked at Ji Tianqing with complicated expressions. Ji Tianqing had destroyed the Duanmu family and killed Murong Lingfeng, the eldest son of the Murong family. These things were no longer a secret. The leaders of the various families, as well as the region lords and city lords, had all heard the news from various channels. Everyone was deeply curious and fearful of Ji Tianqing's strength and methods. Moreover, everyone knew that Ji Tianqing had always been close to the emperor, Long Yunshao. In this way, Ji Tianqing and the 3rd prince were enemies. How could he dare to attend the banquet in Flying Dragon City alone? Looking at his fearless appearance, could it be that he had other motives for attending the banquet in Flying Dragon Palace? Thinking of this, Many nobles and experts secretly stared at Ji Tianqing. Even the 4 realm masters were looking at Ji Tianqing from time to time, quietly sizing him up. At this time, the young geniuses on the right side of the main hall were talking about the demon clan's rampage. Someone mentioned that Yun Yao had been kidnapped by the Demon King a year ago. At that time, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao had gotten married and were going to hold a big banquet in Zhongzhou City. However, they were attacked by the Demon King midway. This incident had caused a stir in Zhongzhou and everyone in the world knew about it. It had been the hottest topic in Zhongzhou for nearly a year. Now that everyone had seen Ji Tianqing, the person involved, with their own eyes, they secretly discussed this matter. A prince mentioned that Ji Tianqing had broken into the northern desert alone and snuck into the Fiend Emperor's lair alone to save Yun Yao. After hearing the news, a few young geniuses wore looks of disbelief and exclaimed. This was especially true for Di Jianqing and Chen Shanzhenwu, who had competed with Ji Tianqing before. When they heard this news, they were even more shocked. The discussions of the young elites overshadowed the conversations of the nobles and experts. The city lords and the patriarchs of the wealthy families all took over this topic and began to discuss it. Unbelievable! Prince Tianqing's strength and methods are truly unfathomable and unbelievable. Prince Tianqing is indeed worthy of being the #1 genius of our clan. He can actually create such a miracle. It's said that the Devil Clan's lair in the northern desert has a perilous terrain and numerous experts. It's extremely dangerous. I didn't expect Domain Lord Tianqing to be able to advance and retreat as he pleases. It's really miraculous. Not only were many city lords and patriarchs praising and admiring of Ji Tianqing, but they also admired him. Even horizontal Xueqi and Yangon territorial lord had a whole new level of respect for Ji Tianqing and flattered him. With Domain Lord Tianqing's current strength and methods, I'm afraid he's not only the #1 genius of our clan, but also the #1 genius of Middle Ground, right? No. It should be said that Domain Lord Tianqing is now the #1 genius of the continent. Domain Lord Tianqing is only 20 years old, but he already has such powerful strength and has created countless miracles. He's simply a peerless genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. Many people in the main hall praised Ji Tianqing and were in awe of him. However, more than half of them were rather critical of this, and their expressions were slightly disdainful. It was even to the extent that they muttered and criticized in secret. TSK. There are billions of martial artists in our clan, and countless geniuses emerge every year. However, how many of them can become top experts in the end? Ha. Who can sit in this main hall today is not a martial arts genius. So what if he's extremely talented? If he dies at a young age, won't everything be for naught? The root of humans' weakness is that they like to listen to hearsay and deliberately exaggerate things. Who would believe the so-called miracles and legends without seeing it with their own eyes? The real person is sitting here, and this group of people is still shamelessly flattering him. Aren't they ashamed? These people did not care about Ji Tianqing's presence at all and whispered to each other. Some people, while criticizing, kept glancing at Ji Tianqing to observe his expression and reaction. Ji Tianqing had been sitting indifferently. Even if he heard the people's discussion, his expression did not change and he completely ignored them. This was because he knew very well that most of the people sitting in the main hall were the third prince's subordinates and supporters. They were all hostile to him. At this time, the Shangchuan district leader, who was sitting above Ji Tianqing, suddenly thought of something and said seriously, as everyone knows, every time an expert advances to the soul-refining realm, there will be a vision of heaven and earth. The more talented a genius is, the more shocking and bizarre the vision of heaven and earth will be. When I broke through to the soul-refining realm, it was midnight. There was only starlight in the sky, and it disappeared after 100 breaths. I'm ashamed to say that the vision of heaven and earth that I caused when I advanced could only be considered as a normal vision. However, I heard that more than a year ago, when the third prince broke through to the soul-refining realm, there was a vision of golden lightning breaking through the sky. That night, a golden lightning tore through the sky and lit up the entire Central Plains. The 100 district leader, who was sitting beside him, nodded quickly and said with a smile, yes. At that time, I happened to be in Central Plains. That night, I saw the vision of golden lightning breaking through the sky with my own eyes. Such an earth-shattering vision is very rare. It hasn't appeared in the past 300 years. From this, we can see that the third prince's talent is the best in the past 300 years. His future is limitless. At this point, the 100 district leader deliberately glanced at Ji Tianqing and asked with a faint smile, District leader Tianqing,
You are recognized as the #1 genius of our tribe. Now you have also broken through to the soul-refining realm. With your talent, the vision of heaven and earth when you break through to the soul-refining realm should be earth-shattering and unprecedented, right?
There was no doubt that the 100 district leader was making trouble in public and taking the opportunity to provoke Ji Tianxing. Everyone in the main hall immediately quieted down and looked at Ji Tianxing in unison. Many people revealed curious and expectant looks, but even more people were waiting to see a good show, taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. Ji Tianxing had been resting with his eyes closed, as if he didn't pay attention to the discussions and conversations of the crowd.
However, now that the 100 district leader had pointed the spearhead at him and the hundreds of people present were staring at him, he had to respond. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he slowly opened his eyes and glanced at the 100 district leader expressionlessly.
He said calmly, "When I broke through to the soul-refining realm, I was in a secret realm and didn't notice any vision of heaven and earth." Hearing his reply, everyone in the hall revealed disappointed expressions and started whispering to each other. The 100 district leader suddenly smiled playfully and shook his head. "Ah, so that means that Tianxing didn't cause a vision of heaven and earth. I can't believe that when the #1 genius of the human race broke through to the soul-refining realm, there wasn't even a vision of heaven and earth. Could it be that the heavens have forgotten about you?" When the people in the hall heard his words, they immediately burst into laughter. Their eyes were filled with mockery, and they were taking pleasure in his misfortune. Everyone knew that the vision of heaven and earth was a change of the way of heaven. It couldn't vary from person to person and was fair to all living things. Chapter 1107. When Ji Tianxing had broken through to the spirit-refining realm, it had been in the Eastern Mountain residence. After reaching the spirit-refining realm, he had only been observing the spirit sword and the changes in his own strength. He had indeed not seen any worldly phenomena. Afterwards, he had not paid much attention to this matter and had not felt anything unusual. Now that he thought about it, he also felt that it was a little strange. Logically speaking, with his innate talent and potential, he should have caused a world-shaking phenomenon. Could it be that the Eastern Mountain residence is an alternate dimension, and the Eastern Mountain sovereign has used extraordinary methods to isolate it from the world? Or could it be that the Tao of Kenshin that I cultivate is different from ordinary martial arts, which is why I did not cause any worldly phenomena? He silently analyzed in his heart and felt that there were only these two possibilities. When everyone in the hall saw that he was silent and deep in thought, they laughed even louder. Many young geniuses who were unconvinced also seemed to see the hope of surpassing him, and they all revealed looks of anticipation and pride. Ha ha ha! What #1 genius of the human race! When breaking through to the spirit-refining realm, he did not even cause any worldly phenomena. I think his reputation is all exaggerated? Hee, looks like his genius title will stop at the spirit-refining realm. His potential has already been exhausted, and there won't be much progress in the future. I feel that he can only be considered the #1 genius below the spirit-refining realm. As for above the spirit-refining realm, he can't even be compared to His Highness the Third Prince. Not only were the young geniuses discussing, the 100-stream Domain Lord and Shangchuan Domain Lord were also discussing with playful expressions. Haha, looking at the current situation, the title of the #1 genius of the human race will soon change hands. Yes, becoming famous early does not mean that your martial arts achievements will be high in the future. It is also possible that you will die prematurely, or disappear into the crowd. Ji Tianxing could ignore these young geniuses and did not care about any of their opinions. After all, he was not on the same level as them, just like how a lion would not pay attention to a mouse jumping in front of it. However, he could not ignore the criticisms of the 100-stream Domain Lord and Shangchuan Domain Lord, nor could he swallow his anger and pretend not to hear. He slowly turned his head to look at the 100-stream Domain Lord beside him, his eyes staring coldly at him as he said expressionlessly, "100-stream Domain Lord, you should shut up." His voice wasn't loud, yet it was low and sonorous, and it contained an indisputable dignity. The 100 Basin Master stopped talking and turned to look at him. With a mocking smile he asked, "Ji Tianxing, what do you mean? Was he angry out of humiliation? Or are you feeling guilty?" Ji Tianxing smirked, revealing a sinister sneer. "You're too noisy. I think you shouldn't be sitting next to me. You should change your seat." The 100 Basin Master was stunned. He frowned and asked, "Ji Tianxing, what are you trying to do?"
This is His Highness the Third Prince's Flying Dragon Palace. You dare. Before he could finish, Ji Tianqing sneered and reached out his hand to grab his neck.
If you're so lively, why don't you go outside and wait?
As he spoke, a dazzling white light of divine soul gushed out of his palm, releasing an incomparably violent power. Although his palm didn't change, in everyone's eyes, it was like a dragon's claw, containing the power to destroy the heavens and earth. It was impossible to defend against. The 100 Basin Master sensed that something was wrong. He instinctively used his qi to defend himself and punched at Ling Xian's palm. However, Ling Xian's speed was extremely fast. With a swoosh, he grabbed the 100 Basin Master's neck. The 100 Basin Master's body froze on the spot. He was suppressed by an invisible divine soul and could not resist at all.
Ji Tianqing picked him up easily like he was picking up a chick.
He shook his hand and threw him to the entrance of the palace.
Swoosh!
The 100 Basin Master flew out in an arc in the air and landed at the entrance of the palace.
With a plop, he hit the ground and rolled a few times before coming to a stop. When he got up from the ground, his hair was disheveled, his golden crown was askew, and his clothes were untidy. He looked extremely embarrassed. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, he was thrown out of the palace by Ji Tianqing. This was a great humiliation. He had never experienced such humiliation in his life. At that moment, the 100 Basin Master was so angry that his entire body shook like a sieve. His face turned red and purple, and the blood in his body flowed in reverse. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood.
Ji Tianqing,
you've gone too far. The 100 Basin Master roared in exasperation. He clenched his fists so tightly that they made cracking sounds. His entire body emitted a murderous aura. The hundreds of nobles and young elites in the hall were all dumbfounded. Everyone stared at this scene with their mouths agape. Their bodies were so stiff that they looked like they had turned into stone. The palace was silent. No one would have thought that Ji Tianqing would be so arrogant and powerful. His way of dealing with criticism and provocation was so simple and violent. The Shangchuan Territory Master came to his senses and was instantly enraged. He pointed at Ji Tianqing and scolded, "Ji Tianqing, you've got guts. Today is the third prince's birthday. How dare you cause trouble in public? You're insulting the third prince. The 100 Basin Master is a loyal official of the imperial court. You've been serving the imperial court for hundreds of years. As the new territory master, you're a junior. How dare you disregard seniority?" The Shangchuan Territory Master was still haranguing Ji Tianqing for his crimes. Ji Tianqing slowly turned his head and looked at him with a sharp gaze. He stretched out a finger and sneered at him. "I only need one finger to press you to the ground. Do you believe me?" The Shangchuan Territory Master was at a loss for words. He swallowed all his resentment and anger back into his stomach. He didn't dare to make another sound. He was furious, but he didn't dare to do anything. He could only suppress it in his heart. He had seen Ji Tianqing's terrifying strength. How could he still dare to provoke Ji Tianqing? He didn't want to follow in the footsteps of the 100 Basin Master. He didn't want to be defeated by Ji Tianqing in public and lose face. Since he couldn't defeat Ji Tianqing, and he didn't dare to provoke Ji Tianqing, he could only swallow his anger and suppress all his anger and humiliation in the bottom of his heart. He glared at Ji Tianqing angrily. He was so angry that his body trembled. He couldn't calm down for a long time. Ji Tianqing ignored him and the 100 Basin Master. He sat down leisurely and continued to rest with his eyes closed. Looking at his calm and leisurely expression, it was as if nothing had happened. Everyone in the main hall was once again shocked by his arrogance and strength. They were dumbfounded and speechless. "Oh my God! How can this guy be so strong?" The 100 Basin Master, who is at LV3 Soul Cultivation Stage, couldn't even fight back and was thrown out in public? He's too arrogant, too arrogant. Not only did he throw the 100 Basin Master out of the door, but he also said that he could defeat the Shangchuan Territory Master with one finger. Oh my God! I've lived for 300 years, and this is the first time I've seen such an arrogant person. He's crazy. The rich and powerful in the hall were so shocked that their hearts were beating wildly. They exclaimed in their hearts. The young elites were even more shocked. They were so shocked by Ji Tianqing that their mouths and tongues were dry. Their blood was boiling, and their faces were flushed with excitement. Chapter 1108. Everything happened too suddenly, and the scene was too explosive. It took a long time for everyone to recover from their shock. No one would have thought that just a moment ago, everyone was still criticizing Ji Tianqing, discussing and mocking him without restraint. In the next moment, he threw the 100-domain lord out of the door with one hand and scared the Shangchuan territorial lord away with one sentence. Such a simple and violent method successfully shocked everyone. The two territorial lords were so humiliated that they vomited blood on the spot, but they did not dare to attack him. They could only run out of the hall like stray dogs with their tails between their legs. The other wealthy families and young elites did not even have the right to challenge Ji Tianqing, so how could they dare to make irresponsible remarks? The main hall quieted down. Everyone was silent, and they looked straight ahead. Even if they were shocked and could not help but discuss with their companions, they did so secretly through voice transmission, not daring to make a sound. After all, Ji Tianqing had already thrown the 100-domain lord out of the door because he thought he was too noisy. If the others dared to make any noise, they would be crushed to death by Ji Tianqing. If it were others, it would be fine. No matter how strong they were, at least they had to abide by the law and respect the ways of the world. However, Ji Tianqing was a temperamental and unrestrained guy. He was not afraid of anything, and everything he did was earth-shattering. This guy even dared to barge into the Devil Emperor's lair alone. Was there anything in the world that he did not dare to do? Many wealthy families and young elites were guessing that even if the third prince was present, Ji Tianqing would not give him any face. Thinking of this, everyone was very afraid of Ji Tianqing. They were incomparably respectful. The wealthy families sitting near him were restless, as if they were sitting on pins and needles. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing did not cause any trouble. He had been resting with his eyes closed. On the surface he looked calm, but in fact, he was secretly releasing his soul energy, extending it to the surroundings to investigate the situation. In just 15 minutes, he had investigated more than half of the Flying Dragon Palace. He had a clear understanding of the Flying Dragon Palace's layout and layout. His soul energy found that the 100-domain lord and the Shangchuan territorial lord did not leave the Flying Dragon Palace after leaving the hall. The two of them passed through several courtyards and entered the third courtyard. Of course, the two's expressions were extremely ugly. They were furious to the extreme, cursing as they walked. There was an exquisite and luxurious palace in the third courtyard. That palace was called the Hidden Dragon Palace Hall. It seemed to be Long Zai Tian's bedroom, and its defenses were extremely tight. Not only did the Hidden Dragon Palace have a powerful soul-grade array formation, but there were also over 100 guards guarding it. No one could get close to it. The two domain lords arrived at the entrance of the Hidden Dragon Palace. After showing the domain lord's golden seal, they were led into the palace by the guards. Originally, the Hidden Dragon Palace was protected by a soul-grade array. Even a soul refinement realm expert would not be able to see what was going on inside the palace. However, Ji Tianqing's soul was different from ordinary cultivators. The power of his soul was incomparably strong, comparable to that of a cultivator at the 6th level of the spirit refining realm. He was able to break through the grand formation of the Hidden Dragon Palace and investigate the situation inside the palace with all his might. At the head of the hall sat a tall, burly and handsome young man with a resolute face. This person wore a golden robe with dragon and phoenix patterns and a golden dragon crown on his head. His pair of phoenix eyes contained a deep and vast meaning that could see through people's hearts. Ji Tianqing was no stranger to this person. He recognized him at a glance. This was the third prince, Long Zai Tian. The 100-flow domain lord and the Shangchuan domain lord entered the hall and stood still. After paying their respects to Tianqing, they recounted what had just happened with a face full of shame and indignation. After Long Zai Tian heard what had happened, a trace of anger appeared on his face. His eyes surged with a cold light. He frowned and thought for a moment, then opened his mouth to appease the two domain lords. He said in a low and dignified voice, calm down your anger. Ji Tianqing has always been arrogant and overbearing. You provoked and insulted him in public, so of course he would have such a reaction. But don't worry, I have already made arrangements and preparations. He dares to come to Flying Dragon City, so it's obvious that he wants to humiliate me. How can I let him be so arrogant? Later, you two go to another courtyard and wait until tonight's banquet begins. Try not to meet Ji Tianqing face to face. As for Ji Tianqing, I will teach him a lesson. Even if he doesn't die, he will lose a layer of skin. Hearing Long Zai Tian's words, the two domain lords' anger subsided.
They hurriedly complimented. Your Highness is far-sighted. You will definitely punish that thief. With your Highness' resourcefulness, sooner or later you will get rid of that bastard and put him to death. Long Zai Tian nodded slightly and waved his hand at the two, indicating that they should leave and rest. After the two domain lords left the hidden dragon palace, Long Zai Tian's face became gloomy. It became darker and darker, and the cold light in his eyes became sharper and sharper. Ji Tianqing, oh Ji Tianqing, I didn't expect your lowly life to be so tenacious. You can actually live until now. When you and Yun Yao got married, I used all my means and schemes to set up an inescapable net in Central State. I wanted to turn your wedding into a funeral. Who would have thought that the demon emperor would suddenly descend and personally attack the wedding's pillar of support, kidnapping Yun Yao? I thought that you would definitely die if you broke into the northern desert alone to save Yun Yao. It was impossible for you to survive. I didn't expect that not only did you come back alive, but you also saved Yun Yao. Long Zai Tian muttered to himself. He secretly clenched his fists and cursed in a cold and resentful tone. Despicable little bastard, I can't let you run wild anymore. This time you came to Flying Dragon City, I won't let you leave alive. After that, he pondered in silence for a while. Then, he waved his hand at the corner of the hall and ordered, Tian-du, go and get that thing for me. In the dark corner of the hall, there was a 2-meter-tall red-haired young man standing tall. This young man looked like a demon. His whole body was muscular, his aura was fierce and wild, and his pupils were blood red. He looked exactly like Tuoba Rue, but in fact, he was the combination of the heaven-swallowing beast and Tuoba Rue, the Tian-du puppet. When the Tian-du puppet heard Long Zai Tian's order, he quickly bowed and said yes. Then, he turned and walked to the corner of the hall. On the stone wall covered with patterns, he cast a spell and unlocked a seal. Swoosh! A stone door opened on the wall, revealing a dark entrance to a secret room. The Tian-du puppet stepped into the secret room and disappeared into the darkness. After about 100 breaths, the Tian-du puppet walked out of the secret room and returned to the hall with a black iron box the size of a wash basin. He held the black iron box with both hands and presented it to Long Zai Tian. Long Zai Tian took the iron box and put it into his spatial ring. He instructed the Tian-du puppet, You stay here and prevent anyone from approaching the secret room. I need to make a trip to the main hall to greet the guests. Chapter 1109. Everything that happened in the Hidden Dragon Palace was clearly investigated by Ji Tianqing. His soul power saw the two domain lords and Long Zai Tian, and also heard their conversation. He had previously guessed that the 100-flow domain lord and Shangchuan domain lord deliberately provoked and ridiculed him, most likely because they were instructed by Long Zai Tian. After listening to the conversation between the three of them, he was even more certain of his guess. In addition, he also heard the conversation between Long Zai Tian and the heavenly puppet clearly. When the heavenly puppet opened the array on the wall and opened the door of the secret room, he carefully stared at the heavenly puppet's movements and memorized the method to break the array. His keen intuition told him that the secret room was very important to Long Zai Tian, and must be hiding treasures or secrets. As for the mysterious box that the heavenly puppet took out from the secret room, he only paid a little attention to it and did not take it too seriously. In his opinion, the thing that Long Zai Tian was willing to take out to show to the public must not be too important. The real core treasure and secret must be hidden in the most hidden secret room. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing made up his mind to find the right opportunity to explore the secret room and see if he could find any clues. He sat in the main hall for about half a quarter of an hour before he heard the voices of the guards outside the door. Greetings, Your Highness. The dozen or so guards guarding the door all knelt down in unison, and their tone was very respectful. The main hall was quiet, and hearing the voices outside the door, everyone looked at the door. Under everyone's gaze, the third Prince Long Zai Tian, dressed in a golden robe and wearing a golden dragon crown, stepped into the main hall. Behind him was a Sky Origin Realm Guard commander, wearing a golden armor, with a dignified face, and holding a gray-black treasure box in his hands. Seeing Long Zai Tian arrive, many guests breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly got up to salute. Greetings, Your Highness. Greetings, Your Highness. Not only many young elites and wealthy nobles, even the horizontal water domain lord and Yong'an domain lord stood up and bowed to Long Zai Tian. Only Ji Tianqing remained seated. His expression was calm as he indifferently sized up Long Zai Tian and the mysterious treasure box in the hands of the guard commander.
Long Zai Tian nodded with a smile on his face, and waved his hand to indicate that everyone was excused and seated. His performance was impeccable. Not only did he display the majesty and nobility of the imperial clan, but he also appeared amiable and approachable. Everyone had a good impression of him.
Under the gazes of the crowd, he walked to the head of the hall and sat down on the golden throne inlaid with jade.
The guard commander held the grayish-black treasure box and stood upright beside him. Long Zai Tian looked around.
His gaze swept across everyone and was full of presence. Even though his eyes swept over Ji Tianqing and saw that there were 2 empty seats beside Ji Tianqing, he didn't seem to notice any clues and his expression remained the same. After a while, he opened his mouth and said, "Everyone, today is this king's 40th birthday. Thank you for taking the time to come to this banquet. It is this king's honor that everyone can come to Flying Dragon City. It also brings light to Flying Dragon Palace. This king has not held a birthday banquet for 10 years. Today, I will take this opportunity to gather with everyone and get to know each other. After all, everyone is the pillar of my clan, the mainstay of the central region." Long Zai Tian said a lot of polite words, making everyone smile. The atmosphere in the hall also became lively and cheerful. A few days ago, a big shot learned that today is this king's birthday and sent a congratulatory gift to this king in advance. Unfortunately, that big shot is busy with government affairs and can't come to this banquet. This king is quite regretful. Hearing his words, everyone showed a look of interest and guessed who the big shot he was talking about was. The horizontal water domain lord's status was higher, so he asked tentatively, "May I ask your highness the third prince, the big shot you are talking about, is it Murong family lord?" Long Zai Tian frowned slightly, but immediately returned to normal. Shaking his head with a smile, he said, "It seems that everyone is very interested in that big shot. Although this is not the main point, since everyone has doubts, this king will say it directly. That big shot is the divine general who guards the East Sea." The horizontal water domain lord suddenly realized and quickly nodded. So it is that big shot. Ji Tianqing was expressionless, but when he heard Long Zai Tian's words, his eyes flashed with a touch of doubt. The divine general who guards the East Sea? Isn't that Xiao Han? Could it be that Xiao Han has a close relationship with Long Zai Tian? No. I have interacted with Xiao Han before. This person's style of doing things is upright, fair and strict. He doesn't look like someone who is in cahoots with Long Zai Tian. Moreover, if he was in cahoots with Long Zai Tian, he wouldn't have helped me enter the East Sea Imperial Court. At this time, Long Zai Tian continued, "The gift sent by the Divine General is very special. It was left behind by a powerhouse 1,000 years ago. It is very mysterious. Unfortunately, this congratulatory gift was placed in a treasure box, and there was an ancient formation seal on the box. The skilled craftsmen and formation Dao grandmasters under my command racked their brains and methods, but they still couldn't crack the array and open the treasure box. No one knows what kind of treasure is inside this treasure box with 1,000 years of history. This king feels that it is a pity, so today, I will take this opportunity to take out this thing for everyone to evaluate and help this king brainstorm. Everyone here is my clan's top powerhouses and heroes. This king believes that with everyone's talent, you will be able to help this king open the treasure box." Hearing this, everyone looked at the mysterious treasure box in the hands of the guard commander. Everyone showed a puzzled and curious look as they carefully observed it. The grayish-black treasure box was the size of a wash basin. It was octagonal in shape and looked simple and mottled. It exuded an ancient aura. The surface of the treasure box was engraved with exquisite patterns, but because it was too old, it had long been mottled and blurred. Even so, everyone could deeply feel that the treasure box contained a vast and mighty power, as heavy and majestic as a mountain. Even if they couldn't see the treasure inside the treasure box, everyone could be sure that it was an extraordinary item. Unfortunately, the treasure box was sealed by a powerful array and no one could open it. This made everyone's hearts itch and they couldn't help but want to open the treasure box to investigate. Seeing that everyone was attracted by the treasure box, Long Zai Tian revealed a playful smile and said, "Everyone, this mysterious gift will be the auspicious item for this king's birthday. Today, if anyone here can break the seal of the treasure box and successfully open the treasure box, this king will give this gift to him as a reward." When everyone heard this, they became even more excited and expectant. Not only were the young elites eager to get into action, even the older nobles were eager to give it a try, their eyes burning with passion. In everyone's eyes, the gift that Dong Lin Divine General gave to the third prince must be a priceless treasure. If anyone could break the seal in front of everyone and open the treasure box, not only would they obtain this treasure, they would also have a lot of face and fame in the central state.
Chapter 11:10. Everyone in the hall began to whisper to each other.
Many people were watching from the sidelines, but there were also some who were eager to give it a try because they were confident in their attainments in formations. A young man in a white robe was the first to stand up. He cupped his hands towards Long Zai-Tian and said, "Your Highness the Third Prince, since all the fellow Taoists and seniors are watching from the sidelines, this humble one is willing to try to break the formation first, throwing a brick to attract jade." Seeing that this person was about to make a move, everyone in the hall looked at him and began to discuss.
This is the genius of the Yi family in Su City. He has reached the 6th level of Sky Origin stage at such a young age. He is quite famous in the central state. It is said that this Yi Feng is not only a martial arts genius, but also an array genius. A few months ago, he fought with an array master and defeated him.
Yes,
I have also heard of that matter.
That is an array master who has been famous for over 100 years.
Yi Feng is indeed very talented. His future is limitless.
Many guests in the hall, after learning about the background of the young man in white robe, let out a burst of exclamations. Their eyes were full of expectation. Long Zai-Tian nodded slightly and ordered the guard to place the mysterious box in the middle of the hall, on a white jade table.
Yi Feng walked to the table and showed a confident smile.
He pretended to be modest to everyone and then began to cast the array to break the seal. His feet moved in a mysterious way, and his hands formed a spell. He constantly waved his hands and shot out streaks of dazzling light into the box. His pace kept increasing as he walked in circles around the white jade table. His hands moved faster and faster, dazzling the eyes of the people. Everyone in the hall stared at him, waiting to see how he would break the array. Many powerful people saw Yi Feng's array skills and nodded their heads to express their appreciation. The young men all had a look of envy and admiration. Even the 2 area leaders had a whole new level of respect for Yi Feng's performance. They whispered to each other and nodded their heads in praise.
Only Ji Tianxing did not have any reaction. He looked at the mysterious box expressionlessly, completely ignoring Yi Feng. Unknowingly, half an hour had passed.
Yi Feng was still circling around the white jade table, desperately casting a spell and injecting his majestic true essence into the mysterious box. He had used almost all of his means, but the mysterious treasure box was still motionless, and the sealing array did not loosen in the slightest. After a long period of continuous casting and a high-intensity infusion of true essence, his true essence was quickly exhausted, and his strength was becoming weaker and weaker.
Everyone could clearly see that his face was getting paler and paler.
Large beads of sweat continuously appeared on his forehead, and his footsteps were somewhat staggered.
Everyone's eyes and expressions changed from the initial excitement and anticipation to doubt and disappointment.
It was even to the extent that some young geniuses who were dissatisfied or envious of him even seized this opportunity to mercilessly ridicule and criticize him.
The originally quiet main hall gradually became lively and clamorous. Everyone's voices were incessant. The pressure on Yi Feng grew greater and greater. In the end, his physical strength was unable to bear it, and his true essence was also difficult to sustain. He had to continuously cast spells. His complexion was pale as he gasped for breath.
Facing Long Zai-Tian, he cupped his hands and saluted. "Your Highness the Third Prince, your humble servant is untalented and was unable to break the array.
I have disappointed you.
The sealing array of your congratulatory gift is really mysterious and terrifying. It is definitely not something that a Sky Origin stage martial artist can break." Finished speaking, Yi Feng's expression was gloomy as he left and returned to his seat to rest.
However, his words brought a huge impact and shock to everyone present.
Oh my god!
Even Yi Feng, this array master, can't break it?
That sealing array on the treasure box. Isn't it a Sky Origin stage array?
Is it a spirit stage array?
Yi Feng said that a Sky Origin stage martial artist can't break it.
Is it really a spirit stage array?
Humph.
I think Yi Feng is deliberately exaggerating to give himself a way out.
If a Sky Origin stage martial artist can't break the array, doesn't that mean only a spirit refining stage martial artist can try? Everyone in the main hall was discussing animatedly, and their expressions were very complicated. Those young geniuses who had been clamoring fiercely before, at this moment, seeing that Yi Feng was unable to break it, all of them gave up. No one dared to try again. Only some of the rich and powerful families, after discussing and considering for a while, one person stood out. This was a short and fat middle-aged man. He was the head of one of the top rich and powerful families in the central state. He had the strength of Sky Origin Stage 8. He bowed to Long Zai-Tian and walked to the side of the white jade table with a serious expression. He carefully observed the treasure box for a long time before he started to break the array. Everyone recognized this head of the family. Not only was he powerful, he was also an array master who had been famous for more than 100 years. Everyone's eyes were filled with anticipation as they stared at him, hoping that he would be able to break the array. He had seen the process of Yi Feng breaking the array and knew that Yi Feng's method was useless. So, he took a different approach and tried to use another rare method to break the array. Many people saw the clues and realized that he was using a special method to break the array. They all exclaimed and their hearts were filled with anticipation. However, this head of the family had just started to cast the array when he touched the seal on the treasure box. Swoosh! The mysterious treasure box lit up with a dazzling flame and exploded with a violent and terrifying power. It immediately sent this person flying and he fell to the ground in a sorry state. When he crawled up from the ground, his hair and clothes were burned and curled. He looked extremely sorry and caused everyone to roar with laughter. Without a doubt, this head of the family also failed. He was also hit by the backlash of the seal and injured his internal organs. Amidst the laughter of the crowd, he left the stage in humiliation. When the hall quieted down, no one dared to try to break the array again. Everyone was watching, discussing, and exclaiming at the power of the seal. Long Zai-Tian looked around the hall and looked at the Yong'an region lord with a playful gaze. He said with a smile, "It seems that only cultivators in the spirit-refining realm can break the seal of the treasure box. Region Lord, I have heard that your array skills are superb and that you are a world-famous array master. It seems that this seat's gift must belong to you. You must not refuse." Suddenly, everyone turned their heads to look at the Yong'an region lord. The Yong'an region lord's expression changed. His heart skipped a beat and he became restless. In reality, his array skills could only be considered excellent. He was definitely not a world-famous array master. But among the guests present, there were only 3 spirit-refining realm cultivators. Other than Ji Tianxing and the Lord of Horizontal Water Realm, his array skills were the strongest. Long Zai-Tian asked him to break the array in front of everyone. This was clearly to embarrass him. Thinking of this, he looked expressionlessly at the mysterious treasure box and thought to himself, "This guy Long Zai-Tian really doesn't have good intentions. He knows that I intend to get closer to the Emperor, so he deliberately suppressed me in front of everyone to make me lose face. If I don't dare to break the array, he will take the opportunity to do me a favor and rope me in." Chapter 11:11. How could a person who could become the ruler of a region be mediocre? The Yangon region ruler had always been low-key, but he was also shrewd and wise. Of course, he could see clearly what the third prince, Long Zai-Tian, was thinking. On the surface, it seemed that Long Zai-Tian was flattering him in public, giving him face and vanity. If he could really break the seal of the treasure box, not only would he get the treasure, but he would also be recognized as an array grandmaster. But the problem was that he had no confidence in breaking the array. Everyone in the hall was looking at him, waiting for him to break the array. If he didn't dare to do it, everyone would laugh their heads off, and it would be even more humiliating. At this moment, the Yangon region ruler hated Long Zai-Tian very much, and he cursed his 18 generations of ancestors in his heart. Of course, it didn't include the emperor. Long Zai-Tian looked at him with a smile, and the guests in the hall looked at him with anticipation. They were discussing enthusiastically, constantly complimenting him, and egging him on to break the array. The Yangon region ruler could only bite the bullet and reluctantly squeeze out a smile. He was about to get up and walk into the hall. Ji Tianxing, who had been sitting beside him, saw his expression and reaction clearly. Just as the Yangon region ruler was about to get up, he suddenly stood up and said expressionlessly, "It's just a soul-level array. How difficult is it to break it?" The noisy hall suddenly quieted down, and everyone looked at him with complicated eyes. No one would have thought that he would actually step forward bravely at this moment, moreover speak such arrogant words, so arrogant.
He ignored everyone's strange eyes and turned to look at the Yangon region ruler beside him. He said calmly, "Yangon region ruler, you are an array grandmaster. This kind of low-level array, you don't need to break it. I can break it easily." The Yangon region lord was startled. He quickly sat back in his seat and heaved a sigh of relief. He showed a relieved look and looked deeply at Ji Tianqing, his eyes filled with deep gratitude. "Tianqing region ruler, thank you for your help. I can't thank you enough." He secretly sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianqing to thank him in a sincere tone. Ji Tianqing only nodded slightly and didn't say anything. He walked towards the white jade table in the middle of the hall. Everyone's gazes gathered on him, revealing looks of doubt and anticipation as they whispered to each other. What is Ji Tianqing trying to do? The third prince is clearly asking the Yong, an region lord, to break the formation. Why is he stealing the limelight? This fellow has just humiliated Bai Lu and the Shangchuan territorial lord, and now he wants to suppress the Yong and territorial lord? He is too arrogant. Even 2 array Dao grandmasters were unable to break the array, and he actually did not put it in his eyes? Aren't you being too arrogant? Everyone, let's wait and see. I think he'll definitely succeed. After all, he's at the soul refinement realm. While everyone was discussing, Long Zai Tian's face was also gloomy as he stared at Ji Tianqing, his eyes flashing with a cold light. Obviously, his target this time was the Yong and region lord. He wanted to use some means to pull the Yong and region lord under his command. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianqing would interfere and ruin his plan. How could he not be angry? Ji Tianqing ignored everyone's reaction and walked to the side of the white jade table. Under everyone's gaze, he calmly raised his hands and made a gesture. He shot out rays of white spiritual light into the mysterious treasure box. Seeing this scene, many people came to a sudden realization, and another burst of discussion broke out. Ji Tianqing is using the power of his spiritual soul. It seems that the sealing array is indeed a soul level 1. Only the power of his spiritual soul can break it. Hey, why does Ji Tianqing's method of breaking the array look so strange? I've never seen it before. Yes. Just now, when the 2 array Dao grandmasters performed the method of breaking the array, they had to coordinate with their steps. Why is Ji Tianqing standing still? Everyone was puzzled, curious, and surprised. At this moment, a white-haired old man stared at Ji Tianqing and observed him for a moment. Suddenly, his face was full of amazement, and he said excitedly, "Ji Tianqing is indeed the #1 genius of our clan. Even his technique is so novel and original. He is standing still like a towering mountain. He doesn't need any fancy method. He just uses force to break force and technique to break technique. He has surpassed the realm of array Dao Grandmaster and reached the realm of returning to simplicity and tracing back to the origin. This is a real array Dao Grandmaster." This white-haired old man was a well-known array Dao Grandmaster in the Central Plains. He had a high prestige. Previously, many people were looking forward to him breaking the array. Unfortunately, the third prince had personally asked the Yong, and region lord, to do it. His evaluation of Ji Tianqing suddenly enlightened everyone. They were full of admiration and kept nodding their heads in admiration. Very quickly, a quarter of an hour passed. Ji Tianqing performed the spell calmly. His hands moved smoothly like moving clouds and flowing water. Soon, the mysterious treasure box lit up with a dazzling golden light. The 18 layers of seals that sealed the treasure box were unraveled like silk being peeled out of a cocoon. They shattered and dissipated continuously. In just a short 15 minutes, all 18 layers of the seal had been broken by him, leaving not a single one behind. Swoosh! The dazzling golden light flashed and disappeared quickly. The seals on the mysterious treasure box disappeared and it returned to its original dull gray color. Ji Tianqing stopped performing the spell. He stretched out his hands and pressed on the hidden buckle of the treasure box. He pulled gently and the treasure box opened with a click. Seeing this, everyone in the hall opened their eyes wide and looked incredulous. Waves of exclamations and discussions erupted from the crowd, causing the quiet hall to immediately become clamorous. "Oh my God! He really broke the seal! This is incredible! He only used a short 15 minutes to unlock the seal on the treasure box. Look at how relaxed he was when he performed the spell. It was like moving clouds and flowing water. He really broke the seal easily. I didn't expect that. Not only is Ji Tianqing the #1 martial arts genius of our clan,
He is also an array grandmaster. Too monstrous. No wonder he is so arrogant. This is the capital of his arrogance. Such a talented and shocking genius is really hard to come by in 1,000 years. In the past, I always heard about Ji Tianqing's legendary deeds. I always thought it was just hearsay and exaggerated. Today I saw his methods with my own eyes. Only then did I know how stupid my previous thoughts were. This guy is really too strong. The young elites in the hall all showed expressions of surprise, envy and jealousy. Many people were so excited that their faces were flushed red. They worshipped Ji Tianqing and saw him as a target to learn from and imitate. Even those older rich and powerful people admired Ji Tianqing to the point of prostrating themselves on the ground. Only Long Zai Tian's face was very gloomy. He frowned and no one knew what he was thinking. Ji Tianqing also ignored the cheers, exclamations and flattery of the crowd. He was using his soul to communicate with Burial of Heaven. Chapter 11-12. In fact, before Ji Tianqing broke the seal, Burial of Heaven had warned him. The reason why he could break the seal so easily and quickly was because Burial of Heaven had told him how to break it. At that time, the situation was urgent, so he didn't ask for the reason and directly broke the seal. Now that the seal had been broken and the treasure box had been opened, he obviously had to ask clearly. Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, "The seal on the treasure box is called the 18 Constellations Illusory Sun Formation. It's a formation created by Kenshin." Hearing this explanation, Ji Tianqing suddenly understood. But he felt more and more puzzled and asked, why would a formation created by Kenshin appear on this treasure box? Could it be that he set it up himself? Could it be that the things in this treasure box were put in by him? Burial of Heaven said with certainty, "Of course not." Kenshin taught the 18 Constellations Illusory Sun Formation to 2 of his followers. I suspect that this treasure box was sealed by one of his disciples. Kenshin's followers? Ji Tianqing's eyes suddenly lit up, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. Long Zaiqian just said that this treasure box was a gift from Divine General Dong Lin. Since that's the case, I have to find time to visit Xiao Han. At this time, everyone in the hall urged Ji Tianqing to open the treasure box and see what treasure was inside. So, he hurriedly gathered his thoughts and reached out to open the lid of the treasure box. The moment the treasure box was opened, a dazzling starlight bloomed from the treasure box, illuminating the entire hall in a dazzling silver. The surging and mighty power of the stars, along with a cold and invisible force, spread out in all directions. Suddenly, the entire hall was enveloped by the silver starlight, and became cool and quiet. The guests present all trembled, their minds and spiritual senses were cleansed, and their spirits were shaken, and their emotions were calmed down. This made everyone realize that the mysterious treasure in the treasure box had the effect of cleansing the soul, and was greatly beneficial to martial artists' cultivation. Everyone revealed curious and expectant eyes, staring at the treasure box, and couldn't wait to see the treasure inside. Ji Tianqing was also full of anticipation. Looking into the treasure box, he saw 2 half-foot-tall crystal bottles in the treasure box. The transparent crystal bottles were filled with silver fine sand. Every grain of fine sand was uniform, shining with the brilliance of the stars, and contained a vast and majestic power. The fine sand in the 2 crystal bottles, who knew how many grains of fine sand there were, contained incomparably terrifying power of the stars. When Ji Tianqing saw the fine sand in the crystal bottles clearly, his eyebrows raised, a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. "It's actually star sand. That's great." Buried Heaven's voice rang in his head as well. He sounded rather excited as he said, "That's right, Tianqing. You've picked up a treasure today. This is the star sand from the star of the outer space. If you can obtain the other 2 materials, it won't be long before the divine sword is restored to the primordial spirit level, comparable to a divine artifact." Of the many guests in the hall, there were some experienced and knowledgeable powerhouses that recognized the star sand in the crystal bottles, and they all let out gasps of disbelief. "Wah! It's actually the legendary star sand. No wonder it contains such a terrifying and vast power of the stars. Star sand, that is a top refining material. It's said that it can be used to refine divine artifacts. The last time someone auctioned star sand in Central State City was 100 years ago. For the last 100 years, this treasure has been priceless, and it's hard to find. The value of star sand cannot be measured with spirit stones. Even an ancient family might not have such a treasure.
Heavens! Divine General Donglin is too extravagant. He actually took out star sand as a congratulatory gift to His Highness the Third Prince. The Third Prince said before that this congratulatory gift was sealed in the treasure box, and even Divine General Donglin didn't know what was inside. If Divine General Donglin knew that the treasure box contained star sand, his intestines would probably turn green from regret, right? Everyone look. His Highness the Third Prince's face doesn't look too good. If he knew that the congratulatory gift was star sand, he wouldn't have taken it out as a prize, right? AI. This time Ji Tianxing is really lucky. Look at his smiling face. He really picked up a treasure. The powerhouses and young elites in the hall understood the preciousness and rarity of star sand. They were all excited to the extreme, and were incomparably envious of Ji Tianxing. Long Zai Tian's face was also somewhat dark. His fists in his sleeves were secretly clenched, and he was so angry that he gnashed his teeth. Just as everyone had guessed, he also didn't know that the treasure box contained star sand. He originally thought that Divine General Donglin was just a casual acquaintance with him, and they didn't have any friendship at all. It was impossible for him to take out such a precious gift. Therefore, he pretended to be generous and took out this congratulatory gift as a prize to liven up the atmosphere. But he never would have thought that the treasure box contained the priceless star sand. This time, he could be considered to have lifted a rock and smashed it on his own foot. He had given away a priceless treasure for nothing. The most important thing was that the person who had obtained this priceless treasure was his life and death enemy, Ji Tianxing. This made him so angry that he almost vomited blood, as if he had eaten a fly. But in public, in front of all the guests, he still had to maintain his poise and bearing. He couldn't show any signs of regret, and he couldn't go back on his words. What was even more infuriating was that Ji Tianxing had taken advantage of him and was still acting innocent. He kept the star sand and the treasure box into his interspatial ring. He even cupped his hands towards Long Zai Tian and said with a smile, "Aya, I didn't expect the Third Prince to be so generous. It's really inconceivable. This seat thanks you. This priceless treasure will be accepted by this seat. I hope the Third Prince won't go back on his words." Long Zai Tian was so angry in his heart that he couldn't wait to tear him into pieces. But under the watchful eyes of everyone, he could only endure the pain and anger in his heart. He barely squeezed out a smile and pretended to be generous. Territorial Lord Tianxing must be joking. This seat will definitely not go back on his words. You can break the seal of the treasure box, so this treasure is naturally yours. Ji Tianxing nodded in agreement and said, "Well, this is more like the demeanor of the Third Prince." After saying that, he turned around with a smile and returned to his seat. Hundreds of people in the main hall looked at him with envy, and they were still discussing and exclaiming. The Yangon Region Lord and the Horizontal Water Lord looked at Long Zai Tian with strange eyes, and then looked at Ji Tianxing. They muttered in their hearts, "Today is obviously the Third Prince's birthday. He should be the focus of the audience. How could Ji Tianxing steal the limelight and become dim? Ji Tianxing, this guy's performance today is really too eye-catching. Not only did he suppress the two region lords, but he also humiliated the two region lords and made the Third Prince vomit blood." Chapter 11-13. The matter of cracking the mysterious box was just a small episode before the banquet. The Third Prince's original intention was to use the mysterious box to liven up the atmosphere and win over the Yong and region lord. However, the final result was beyond his expectations. He not only lost the priceless treasure, the star sand, but also lost the opportunity to win over the Yong and region lord. The most infuriating thing was that the star sand was obtained by Ji Tianxing. He would rather give this gift to a stranger than see it fall into the hands of Ji Tianxing. In this way, he could be considered to have suffered a double loss and suffered a huge loss. After the matter was over, he casually found an excuse and left. The rest of the people stayed in the main hall and were still discussing the previous matter. Ji Tianxing became the focus of the whole banquet. He was envied by everyone and became the core of everyone's discussion. The Yong and region lord, the horizontal water lord, the city lords and the powerhouses all clustered around Ji Tianxing. They constantly complimented and flattered him. They admired and respected him very much. Even some young talents gathered their courage and came over to pay their respects to Ji Tianxing. They wanted to be familiar with him. At least, when these people went back, They could boast to their peers that they had met Ji Tianqing and had a warm conversation with him. For them, this was not only something to brag about, but also a supreme honor. Ji Tianqing's reaction was dull. He politely declined the flattery and praise of the people and did not respond. Unknowingly, 2 hours passed.
It was already late, and the sun was setting in the evening.
The main hall was bustling with noise for a long time.
Then, a guard commander entered the main hall and loudly announced that the banquet was about to begin.
Everyone quieted down and gradually calmed down. Not long after, a group of young and beautiful maids served all kinds of delicious food and wine and placed them on the long narrow tables in front of the guests. In the square outside the main hall, big red lanterns were lit and a raging bonfire was lit. There were also countless delicious food, wine, fruits and pastries placed on the long narrow tables around the square for the guests to enjoy. There were also some graceful dancers and singers playing beautiful music in the square and dancing gracefully. The atmosphere inside and outside the main hall was jubilant. Countless guests were singing and dancing, celebrating Long Zitian's birthday. Long Zitian also brought the housekeeper and the imperial bodyguard commander back to the main hall. He sat down at the head of the table and accompanied everyone to the banquet. After a period of adjustment, his state of mind and expression had returned to normal. He had a smile on his face, and his expression was as calm as usual.
There was not the slightest bit of anger or depression, as if nothing had happened in the afternoon.
Moreover, when he was chatting and drinking with everyone, he would intentionally or unintentionally glance at Ji Tianqing, his eyes flashing with a mocking sneer. Ji Tianqing had been drinking silently, occasionally listening to the conversations of the crowd.
He inadvertently discovered Long Zitian's abnormality, and slightly frowned, thinking in his heart, Long Zitian, this guy, has a sinister and despicable appearance. Don't tell me he wants to use some scheme again?
He sensed that Long Zitian had bad intentions, so he secretly raised his vigilance. Unknowingly, an hour passed. The lively and noisy banquet was about to come to an end. Many guests were slightly tipsy and left the banquet, returning to their residence to rest. The Yangon region ruler followed Ji Tianqing to leave the banquet. After leaving the main hall, they were led by the imperial bodyguard captain to rest in the courtyard. Under the instructions of Long Zitian, the imperial bodyguard captain arranged for the two to stay in the plum blossom courtyard. There were a total of 3 people living in this small house. In addition to the 2 of them, there was also the horizontal water domain lord. Ji Tianqing and the Yangon region ruler walked together. After returning to the courtyard, they said goodbye to each other and returned to their rooms. When Ji Tianqing entered the room, he was shocked by the scene in the room. His residence was a set of rooms. In the middle was a spacious living room, and on both sides were a study and a bedroom. The back of the study was connected to the back garden, and the bedroom was also connected to a secret room for practice. The room was decorated very luxuriously. It looked splendid with gold and jade, and there was a light red light burning, revealing a charming atmosphere that made one's heart itch. Moreover, there were bronze incense burners in the living room and bedroom, burning with a refreshing and enchanting fragrance. That kind of invisible fragrance quietly seeped into the mind and soul, making one's heart full of restlessness and desire. Their whole body would heat up, and they couldn't wait to find a few beauties to quench their thirst. Ji Tianqing sensed that something was wrong. He frowned and looked at the situation in the bedroom. He saw that on the wide wooden bed surrounded by white gauze curtains, there was a red brocade quilt embroidered with mandarin ducks. A beautiful girl with skin as tender as jade, wearing only a red doudou, was lying in the quilt, leaning on the bed, looking at him with blurred eyes. "Young master, you're finally back. I've been waiting for you for a long time." The beautiful and delicate young girl slightly raised her body, revealing her long black hair that draped over her fair and delicate shoulders like a waterfall. She had a shy and timid posture, and her charming face was a little red as she looked at Ji Tianqing, her eyes full of admiration and desire. If it was any normal man, in this kind of restless environment, seeing such a breathtaking beauty, they would let their imagination run wild. Especially when that beautiful girl put on a posture of letting him do whatever he wanted, and let him enjoy her to his heart's content. This made people unable to restrain the prairie fire in their hearts, and they couldn't wait to pounce on her and enjoy her to their heart's content. However, Ji Tianqing resisted the restlessness in his soul, and his heart was calm. He looked at her with clear and cold eyes, and asked in a deep voice, "Who are you? Why are you in my room?" That charming girl was also stunned for a moment, and immediately revealed a trace of a young and charming smile, and explained, "Young master,
I'm here to serve you. Other than this servant, the other guests in these courtyards all have their own personal attendants. They are all 1 in 1,000 beauties. The meaning of the young girl's words was obviously hinting to Ji Tianqing that he didn't need to feel embarrassed, as every guest had a beautiful woman to accompany them. However, Ji Tianqing frowned, and expressionlessly said to her, I'm not resting, and still need to meditate and cultivate. Please leave. That charming girl obviously didn't expect him to be such an unromantic person, and immediately revealed a wronged expression. Timidly lowering her head, she said, Young master, could it be that you think I'm a prostitute and think I'm not clean? You've misunderstood. I'm also the young miss of an official's family, and until now, I've still been a virgin for 16 years, and I've never been touched by a strange man. Moreover, I'm just following the master's orders. If you let me leave, the master will punish me, and I'll be punished. Saying this, she lifted the red brocade quilt, and lifted a pair of white and tender, slender and long legs. She walked in front of Ji Tianqing and knelt down. She stretched out her smooth arms, and with her soft and boneless hands, hugged Ji Tianqing's legs, and bitterly begged, Young master, how can you bear to let me be tortured and punished? Chapter 11:14. If it were an ordinary man, like Ji Tianqing, who was young and vigorous, he might have agreed. After all, the girl looked so pitiful. She was begging in a soft voice. It was hard for him to refuse. Most importantly, although this girl was not as beautiful as Ji Ku and Yun Yao, she was still a 1 in a million beauty. Such a beautiful girl kneeling down and begging to warm the bed and serve him. Which normal man would refuse? Who wouldn't be tempted? Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing was not a normal man, let alone an ordinary man. He expressionlessly looked at the pretty girl, his eyes staring into her eyes, ignoring the fact that she was only wearing a doo-doo. His lips curled into a cold smile. How can a lady from an ordinary official's family reach the second level of Sky origin stage in her 20s? If you are really a lady from an official's family, you should have never done any household chores. Your hands should be as white as jade. However, there is a layer of calluses on your palms. Your bones are also a little deformed. Obviously, it is caused by long-term sword practice. What's more, you are using a double-edged sword. Your martial art is light and soft. Hearing his words, the pretty girl's delicate body trembled, and her face turned pale. Her gaze was somewhat evasive as she didn't dare to look directly into Ji Tianqing's sharp eyes. She slightly lowered her head and didn't know how to explain herself. She didn't know that she had tried to erase the traces of martial arts on her body. She even used a secret treasure to cover her aura. However, Ji Tianqing still managed to see through her disguise at first glance. He even managed to guess the attributes of her weapon and cultivation technique with just a little bit of information. It was terrifying. However, she had been through strict training. She was mentally strong. She came back to her senses immediately. She looked at Ji Tianqing with her clear eyes and said sincerely, Master, in this world of martial arts, if I didn't know martial arts, how could I survive until now? No matter what, I don't have any grudges with you. I don't even know you. Why would I hurt you? This servant is only following the master's instructions to serve you, this esteemed guest, with a pure body. It is enough to make you comfortable and satisfied. After a night of entanglement, this servant will no longer have anything to do with you, and will not investigate your identity. What else are you worried about? Ji Tianqing curled his lips and sneered calmly. Even if I am a lecherous man who wants to spend a night with a beauty, I will never share a bed with you. I'm a man with a family. Moreover, my wife is a world-famous, devastatingly beautiful heaven's proud daughter, as pure and holy as a fairy from the 9th heaven. Do you think that I'm used to seeing fairies in the heavens? Do you think that I'll be interested in the vulgar women of the mortal world? Go back and tell Long Zai Tian that the beauty trap is useless against me. If he really wants to deal with me, ask him to use his brain more. With that, he urged the pretty girl to put on her clothes and leave. The young girl was on the verge of tears. With a face full of grievance, she said, Young master, this servant knows that you are a person like the stars in the sky. With this servant's looks, it is impossible for this servant to be associated with you. But when this servant was sent into the room, I only had this doo-doo covering my body. Could it be that young master wants this servant to leave like this? If others see this servant in such an embarrassing state, this servant might as well die. Ji Tianqing was speechless. In his heart he thought, Long Xition, this dog, is really despicable and shameless.
All right, if you don't want to leave, then I'll leave.
He left without looking back and walked out of the room. The pretty girl cried out and immediately stretched out her soft arms, tightly hugging his thighs. Her whole body hung on his body. Young master, this servant begs you. Please be merciful and pamper this servant.
Ji Tianxing turned around indifferently.
He stretched out his hand and pointed at her neck, sealing her acupuncture point and all her strength.
The young girl was unable to move.
Her body stood stiffly in the room, and she couldn't even open her mouth to speak.
Ji Tianxing waved his hand again and picked up the red brocade blanket from the bed.
He wrapped the young girl tightly and threw her onto the bed.
Stay here obediently. When the sun rises, your acupuncture point will naturally be unsealed. At that time, you can leave on your own.
After saying that, he left the room without looking back.
His figure disappeared into the night. The young girl was wrapped up like a dumpling by the red blanket. She lay on the bed, unable to move. She could only watch as Ji Tianxing left.
She stared at his back with her eyes wide open.
She let out a whimper. After a while, when Ji Tianxing was far away and the sound of his footsteps disappeared, she finally calmed down. She furrowed her willowy eyebrows. Her originally clear and kind eyes flashed with a gloomy cold light. After Ji Tianxing left the plum blossom courtyard, he secretly used a secret technique to hide his tracks and aura. Then, he headed towards the third courtyard. He had been thinking about the mysterious secret room in the third courtyard's hidden dragon palace. Previously, he had used his soul to investigate. The celestial puppet had entered the secret room and taken out the mysterious treasure box containing the star sand.
Through the expressions of Long Xition and the celestial puppet, he could determine that the secret room was very important.
It was very likely that it contained Long Xition's treasures and secrets. There might even be some clues that could be used against him. Tonight was an excellent opportunity. He came to the Flying Dragon Palace openly. Long Xition was still in the main hall of the front courtyard, drinking and chatting with the guests. Tomorrow, he would leave the Flying Dragon Palace. If he didn't take advantage of tonight to sneak into the secret room and investigate, how could he be satisfied?
After 100 breaths of time, he quietly went around a dozen sentry posts and avoided dozens of guards.
He was outside the Hidden Dragon Palace. Under the curtain of night, the Hidden Dragon Palace was quiet and the lights were dim.
Other than a dozen red lanterns hanging at the entrance of the main hall and under the eaves of the corridors, there was not a trace of light in the palace.
Ji Tianxing observed his surroundings for a while. After confirming that it was safe, he secretly used the Earth Escape technique and sneaked into the Hidden Dragon Palace from underground. Of course, there was also a spirit grade array blocking him underground. He spent a bit of effort and wasted an hour before he broke open a crack in the array.
Then, he passed through the crack in the array and came out of the ground.
He appeared in the dark and lightless main hall. Whoosh! Like a ghost, he silently came out of the ground.
But just as he steadied himself, before he could see the scene in the main hall, a low shout came from behind him.
Who is it? How dare you intrude into the Hidden Dragon Palace? You're courting death. As the murderous roar resounded, a dark red saber light chopped down at lightning speed. He didn't have time to turn around.
He threw out a giant golden palm and slapped it at the blade light.
Bang! With a muffled sound, the blood-red blade light was smashed into pieces. The giant golden palm struck a figure, sending that person flying backward and crashing into the wall. Chapter 11:15. Ji Tianxing naturally knew that the real Tuoba Rue had died long ago. The demon youth in front of him that looked like Tuoba Rue was actually a celestial puppet transformed from the heaven-swallowing beast. After a year, the celestial puppet's strength was even greater than before. It had reached the second level of the soul refinement realm. Ji Tianxing frowned and looked at the celestial puppet sharply, observing its changes. At this time, the celestial puppet crawled up from the ground. Dark red bloodlight surged from its body as it waved its palms and attacked again. He unleashed all of his power and condensed a dozen blood-red sharp blades, stabbing towards Ji Tianxing from all directions. Ji Tianxing did not want to be entangled with it too much to avoid causing too much commotion and alerting the guards outside the Hidden Dragon Palace. In order to end the battle quickly, he did not hesitate to use his divine spirit sword and attacked the celestial puppet with all his strength. Swoosh! Swoosh! Two divine soul golden swords, each more than 3 feet long, shot out, one from the left and one from the right. In an instant, they destroyed several bloody blades and struck the celestial capital puppet. Bam bam! 2 muffled sounds rang out at almost the same time, echoing in the palace. The celestial puppet's chest and throat were pierced by the divine spirit golden swords. It flew back a dozen steps and crashed into the wall again. There were 2 fist-sized wounds that went through the front and back. Dark red blood constantly gushed out. The celestial puppet crashed into the wall and fell to the ground. After rolling a few times, it stopped and could no longer move. Its physical body had been destroyed and it died on the spot. However, its divine spirit flew out of the corpse and burrowed into the ground with a swoosh, disappearing. Ji Tianqing hurriedly withdrew the 2 divine spirit golden swords and used his divine spirit power to track down the celestial puppet's divine spirit. He found that the celestial puppet's divine spirit did not escape outside the palace. Instead, it burrowed deep into the ground and escaped into the secret room. This damned monster is really loyal. Its physical body was destroyed, but its divine spirit still wants to protect that secret room. This made him even more certain that the secret room hid a huge secret. Otherwise, the celestial puppet would not protect it so desperately. Unfortunately, the secret chamber was hidden deep underground and was protected by a powerful formation. The celestial puppet was very familiar with the formation of the secret chamber. It could pass through the protective formation and burrow into the secret chamber from underground. Yet, he could only walk to the corner of the hall and unleash boundless magic power from his palm, activating the mechanism array on the wall. Previously, when the celestial capital puppet had opened the door to the secret chamber, he had secretly memorized the method to open it. Sure enough, when he finished casting the spell, the wall made a muffled sound, and a stone door immediately opened. Shwa! Without hesitation, he stepped through the stone door and entered a dimly lit passageway. The passage made of rocks twisted and turned downwards, all the way to the depths of the earth. He flew in the tunnel for 10 breaths of time and arrived several hundred meters underground. He entered a secret room. This secret chamber had a radius of over 1,000 meters. It was huge and spacious, and there were rows of stone lamps on the walls, emitting a dim yellow light. The scene in the secret chamber was out of Ji Tianqing's expectations. He frowned on the spot, revealing a look of vigilance and wariness. He saw that on the walls of the secret chamber, there were many hidden compartments, used to store all kinds of treasures and resources. On the wide floor of the secret chamber, on the dark stone floor, there were countless complex patterns, outlining a huge formation pattern. And in the middle of the secret chamber, there was a 100-meter-tall, 5-colored altar. The altar was like a pyramid. Its appearance was simple and crude, and the runes and patterns carved on it were very exquisite and mysterious. Its entire body emitted a colorful brilliance, and it rippled with boundless and mighty power. Ji Tianqing was no stranger to this altar. This was Long Zai Tian's strongest trump card, the venomous insect Dao artifact, the origin of all venomous insects. The origin of all venomous insects is Long Zai Tian's strongest trump card. He has always carried it with him. How could he have placed it in this secret chamber? Ji Tianqing frowned, his heart full of doubts. He vaguely had a bad premonition, and he was secretly on guard. At this moment, the formation patterns on the floor of the secret chamber suddenly lit up with a dazzling 5-colored brilliance. Swoosh! The 5-colored brilliance appeared out of thin air, condensing into a light shield of 1,000 meters, like an inverted bowl, enveloping the entire secret chamber. The area of 1,000 meters was sealed and imprisoned. Ji Tianqing was inside the 5-colored light shield. He only felt that it was difficult to breathe and move. There was an invisible force coming from all directions, suppressing him like a mountain, making him feel as if he was trapped in a quagmire. At the same time, at the top of the 5-colored altar, 2 figures suddenly appeared. The leader was wearing a golden dragon robe and a golden dragon crown. He was tall and burly, exuding a confident and arrogant domineering aura. He was the 3rd prince, Long Zai Tian. The figure behind him was a demon clan youth, and it was the heavenly puppet that had escaped into the secret chamber just now. Long Zai Tian looked down at Ji Tianqing from above, and sneered complacently. Ji Tianqing, you are truly audacious, coming to Flying Dragon City alone, and even daring to barge into my secret chamber at night. I did not guess wrongly. I had long expected that you would barge in here, so I prepared a big surprise for you in advance. Ha ha! Ji Tianqing raised his head to look at the top of the altar, and after seeing Long Zai Tian and the heavenly puppet, his expression immediately changed, and his eyes became extremely solemn. Damn it! This was actually Long Zai Tian's scheme.
This dog. He had long expected that I would barge into the secret chamber, and actually set up an ambush here in advance.
Seeing that the heavenly puppet was intact, he immediately understood that the puppet's body that he had destroyed in the main hall was just a substitute. Long Zai Tian had long planned and arranged it.
He stared coldly at Long Zai Tian, and shouted in a deep voice. Long Zai Tian, you are truly sinister and despicable.
Long Zai Tian grinned, and said with a sneer, Hee, this is my wisdom, to be able to predict the enemy's actions, and only then can I make you walk right into my trap. This time, you clearly came to Flying Dragon City with ill intentions, and repeatedly embarrassed me. How can I let you off so easily? Ji Tianqing, tonight is the day of your death, and our grudges will be settled immediately. Stop resisting stubbornly. Kneel down and surrender. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, and said with a disdainful sneer, Long Zai Tian, you are too confident and arrogant. With just you and a heavenly puppet, you dare to say that you can kill me? Long Zai Tian nodded his head slightly, and said with a sneer, With the strength of this heavenly puppet and I, we really don't have the confidence to kill you. But what about with the help of these two experts? As soon as he finished speaking, two middle-aged men appeared beside him. These two people stood on his left and right, and looked at Ji Tianqing with a sneer on their faces. Ji Tianqing instantly recognized them. They were the 100 Basin Lord and the Shangchuan Domain Lord. He immediately frowned, and a cold killing intent flashed across his eyes. But this was not the end, Long Zai Tian continued. Other than the four of us, I have also set up the 5 Absolute Sky Array. With this spirit-level array, combined with my 10,000 Gu altar, it is enough to kill 7th or 8th level Spirit Refinement Realm experts. Chapter 11:16. Without a doubt, Long Zai Tian was determined to kill Ji Tianqing tonight. He understood Ji Tianqing's nature very well. After careful planning, he finally set up this death trap. He was a young genius in the spirit refinement realm. Adding on the ferocious and powerful puppet, it was enough to give Ji Tianqing a headache. He did not expect that he would pull the Shangchuan Domain Lord and the 100 Stream Domain Lord into his ship to deal with Ji Tianqing. More importantly, the 5 ultimate sky formation that sealed the entire secret room was a spirit-level high-grade array. This array combined with 1,000 Gu altar had terrifying power, enough to kill a 7th or 8th level spirit refinement realm expert. No matter how one looked at it, Ji Tianqing had no chance of surviving or escaping. He was dead for sure. Ji Tianqing's face was gloomy and his eyes were cold as ice. He stared at Long Zai Tian and said in a deep voice, Long Zai Tian, your sinister and despicable nature has indeed exceeded my expectations. However, you mustered such a large force and pulled in 2 domain lords to deal with me. Have you ever thought that if your plan failed and this matter was leaked out, you would be completely finished? Long Zai Tian nodded slightly and sneered. That's right, I did take a huge risk. If I did not succeed, my reputation would be ruined. However, you are too difficult to deal with. You are the strongest enemy in my life. In order to get rid of you as soon as possible, I can disregard everything and bet everything on it. The facts have proven that I succeeded. The trap I set up is a death trap. No matter what, you will die for sure. I really can't think of any chance of you surviving. As long as you die, I can rest easy and the news will not be leaked out. I am still the honorable third prince. Not long after, I will defeat Long Yun Shao and seize the throne of the Son of Heaven. In the end, I will become the emperor of the human race. After thousands of years, the world will only remember my great achievements. Who will remember a loser like you? History and justice have always been written by the winner. The loser has no right to speak. Ha 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 ha. Long Zai Tian's attitude was as if victory was in his grasp. He was arrogant to the extreme. The 2 area leaders also revealed cold smiles. Their eyes were full of anticipation, and they were in high spirits. They are Long Zai Tian's loyal dogs. Tonight, they will eradicate Ji Tianqing. Not only will they be able to vent their anger, they will also be able to make the greatest contribution. In the future, when Long Zaitian succeeds the position of Son of Heaven and Monarch, they will be the greatest contributors and will definitely be put in an important position. Thinking of this, the 2 of them were filled with excitement and longing, their blood boiling. Ji Tianqing silently accumulated his strength,
and his entire body surged with sword intent that soared into the sky as he secretly resisted the suppressive force of the 5 extreme sky force formation.
Very good.
Long Zai Tian, it seems like you want to stake everything on this one throw. Then I can only fight with my back to the river, and thoroughly end this grudge with you. As he spoke, a black light flashed in his right palm, and a black broken sword appeared. Long Zai Tian retracted his cold smile. His entire body emitted a cold killing intent as he ordered in a deep voice. Attack together, we must kill him as fast as possible. Following his order, the celestial puppet flew up from the altar and pounced towards Ji Tianqing from above. The 100 Flow Territory Lord and the Shangchuan Territory Lord also took out their treasured swords, and used their peerless sword techniques to attack Ji Tianqing.
Swoosh swoosh swoosh.
In a split second, dozens of cold sword lights and bloody blades slashed down from the sky, enveloping Ji Tianqing's figure.
Ji Tianqing did not panic in the face of danger.
Golden light flickered on his back, and a pair of golden wings condensed. He raised his magma-like left arm and slammed his palm towards the celestial puppet, while his right hand slashed out a sword light that could split heaven and earth, and attack the 2 territory lords. Burning sky palm.
Metal Emperor slash.
The huge flaming palm that blotted out the sky instantly shattered the bloody blades released by the celestial puppet, and hit him with a bang. With a bang, the celestial puppet was sent flying by the burning sky palm, and crashed heavily onto the 10,000 gu altar. Although his body was formed by the heaven-swallowing beast, and his defense and strength were very strong, he was still unable to withstand the burning sky palm. However, he was still unable to withstand the might of the burning heaven palm. Cracks actually appeared all over his body from the impact, and his flesh and blood were all burnt into charcoal. The golden sword light from the broken sword was hundreds of meters long, and it exploded with an unstoppable force.
Kaboom!
The huge sword instantly broke through dozens of sword lights, and hit the Shangchuan Territory Lord with a dull cracking sound. The Shangchuan Territory Lord, who was at the 3rd level of the soul cultivation realm, could not withstand Ji Tianqing's attack. His protective Dharma power and armor were shattered on the spot, and he was sent flying with blood spurting out of his mouth, and fell below the altar. Then, the 100 Flow Territory Lord wielded his treasured sword and slashed at Ji Tianqing. But when the sword light came down on him, he did not hesitate to close his wings and protect himself.
Boom!
A deafening explosion burst out, and the sky was filled with golden light and white divine soul light, bursting out in all directions in the secret chamber.
Ji Tianqing stood where he was and was only pushed back 10 steps. He was not injured at all.
However, the 100 Flow Territory Lord was pushed back 100 steps before he could regain his balance.
He was shocked and could not believe it.
He roared and pounced at Ji Tianqing again, holding the sword with both hands.
Earth-shattering slash.
The 100 Flow Territory Lord unleashed all his power and used his most powerful attack, slashing out a 100-meter-long giant sword. The power of the giant sword was enough to split 100 miles and turn the earth into a deep abyss.
Ji Tianqing frowned slightly.
His eyes flickered as he used the 9 heaven-burying swords without hesitation.
Sword draw form.
He immediately drew out the sword and poured his powerful divine soul energy into the broken sword, and slashed at the 100 Flow Territory Lord with all his might. An earth-shattering sword light slashed out and met the 100-meter-long giant sword. Bang! In an instant, the 100-meter-long giant sword was broken and shattered into pieces. The 100 Flow Territory Lord could not dodge in time and was cut in half by the sword light. His body split apart from the middle, turning into 2 halves. Dark red blood mixed together as they fell from the sky. A dignified domain lord, a powerhouse at the 3rd level of the soul refinement realm, was actually killed by Ji Tianqing in a single strike. Even his divine soul was split into 2 by the sword. It shattered on the spot and was completely obliterated. After all, Ji Tianqing's earth-shattering sword contained terrifying divine soul energy. Both the celestial capital puppet and the Shangchuan Territorial Lord were dumbfounded at the sight of this. Their eyes widened in horror. They could not believe that Ji Tianqing's strength had actually reached such an extent. This was insane. While the 2 of them were in a daze, Ji Tianqing swung his sword again and stabbed at the heavenly capital puppet.
Sword thrust form.
A cold star lit up the sky. As the broken sword stabbed, an extremely condensed cold light appeared and disappeared into thin air. It crossed a few hundred meters and pierced the heavenly capital puppet's chest. Although the cold light was only the size of a fist. However, when it struck the celestial puppet, it suddenly erupted with a power that could destroy the heavens and earth.
Boom! Chapter 11:17. The celestial puppet's body was transformed from a gigantic heaven-devouring beast. It was transformed from its original body, and its defense and strength were extremely strong. No one expected that it would be destroyed by Ji Tianqing's sword and turned into a bloody pulp. Not only that, but the power of the explosion created a huge crater in the secret chamber's ground. The entire secret chamber shook violently, and more than 10 trenches that were more than 10 miles long appeared in the ground. The earth-shattering commotion caused the entire hidden dragon palace and even the entire flying dragon palace to tremble. It was simply too terrifying. The Shangchuan territorial lord and Long Zhaitian were both stunned, and their eyes were filled with fear. However, Long Zhaitian did not participate in the battle from the beginning, as he was busy controlling the 10,000 Gu altar. His plan was to let the celestial puppet and the 2 territorial lords stall Ji Tianqing, and it would be best if they could injure Ji Tianqing. Then, he would control the 10,000 Gu altar's power and kill Ji Tianqing on the spot. This was originally a foolproof plan that would go smoothly. However, no matter how much Long Zhaitian calculated, he did not expect Ji Tianqing's true strength to reach such a terrifying level. The celestial puppet and the 2 territorial lords were instantly killed after exchanging a few blows with him. Seeing this scene, Long Zhaitian was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. His heart was filled with anxiety and anger. However, he could not give up halfway. He desperately used his dermic powers to control the 10,000 Gu altar and accumulate terrifying power. Whoosh! At this moment, after Ji Tianqing killed the celestial puppet, he did not hesitate to kill the Shangchuan territorial lord. Die! He roared with murderous intent and slashed out 100-meter-long divine soul sword light with his broken sword. The dazzling white sword instantly struck the Shangchuan territorial lord. The pitiful Shangchuan territorial lord had not recovered from his shock and wanted to dodge, but it was already too late. Bam! Another loud, muffled sound rang out. The enormous divine soul sword light split the Shangchuan territorial lord in half. Even his divine soul could not escape and was directly cut into pieces by the giant sword. The Shangchuan territorial lord followed in the footsteps of the 100 domain lords and was killed on the spot. The raging energy and dazzling sword light filled the secret chamber within a radius of 1,000 meters, causing chaos in the secret chamber. In the blink of an eye, only Ji Tianqing and Long Zhaitian were left in the secret chamber. Of course, the heavenly capital puppet's fleshly body was destroyed, but its divine soul still survived. When it saw Ji Tianqing carrying the broken sword and rushing towards Long Zhaitian at lightning speed, it was immediately filled with anxiety. No! I can't let you destroy my lord's plan. The celestial puppet's divine soul let out a roar. Its 2 soul dharma eyes charged towards Ji Tianqing fearlessly, carrying the power of its soul dharma eyes. His 2 dharma eyes unleashed thousands of divine soul white light beams, intending to fight Ji Tianqing to the death. Swish! Swish! Thousands of white light blades fell from the sky like a rain of arrows, enveloping Ji Tianqing's figure. In order to stop Ji Tianqing, the celestial puppet no longer cared about the consequences. This supreme technique had exhausted all of its spiritual energy. Therefore, the power of this ultimate technique was also unimaginably strong. No matter how strong Ji Tianqing was, he didn't dare to ignore the bombardment of divine soul light blades. Wings of the Golden Rock. He suddenly let out a low growl and closed the golden wings on his shoulders to protect himself. In the next moment, an overwhelming amount of white light blades came crashing down, hitting the golden wings one after another. Bang 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 bang. Amidst a series of muffled sounds, the pair of golden wings trembled from the impact of the white blades. Ji Tianqing couldn't stop himself from retreating. He was forced back several hundred steps, all the way to the edge of the secret chamber. Only when his back was against the edge of the 5 extremes array did he stop. Although the golden wings blocked the attack of thousands of divine soul light blades, leaving him unscathed. But the power of the golden wings was almost exhausted, and the light became much dimmer. After the divine light blades dissipated, Ji Tianqing spread out his golden wings and looked up at the 2 divine soul eyes in the air. Evil creature, your time of death has come. He let out a low growl and waved the broken sword in his right hand, slashing out 2 divine soul sword lights with all his strength. Bang bang! 2 blazing white giant swords 10 feet long slashed the 2 divine soul eyes, causing 2 loud muffled sounds. The celestial puppet's 2 divine soul eyes were shattered on the spot, turning into white light fragments that scattered in all directions. In the moment before its death,
A final thought flashed through its divine soul.
Lord, I've done my best. You must succeed. As dozens of white light fragments fell from the sky, the celestial puppet was completely destroyed. The two territorial lords and the celestial puppet were dead, and now only Ji Tianqing and Long Zitian were left. Ji Tianqing's body was filled with killing intent, and he turned to look at the top of the altar, looking for traces of Long Zitian. However, at this moment, an angry and resentful roar came from the 10,000 Gu altar. 10,000 Gu holy technique, devour the heavens and earth. As Long Zitian roared, the power of the 10,000 Gu altar and the 5 ultimate sky formations suddenly burst out to the extreme. The 100-meter-tall 5-colored altar lit up with a 5-colored rainbow light that enveloped heaven and earth, releasing an incomparably terrifying power that enveloped Ji Tianqing. His expression changed, and he immediately retreated. Swoosh! But the 5-colored rainbow light that blotted out the sky was unimaginably fast, and it instantly enveloped him. He was drowned in the 5-colored rainbow light, and his whole body was wrapped in a mysterious and vast power. His body stiffened on the spot, and he was completely unable to move. Withdraw! Long Zitian's angry roar came from the altar again. Immediately, the 10,000 Gu altar released an incomparably terrifying devouring power that enveloped Ji Tianqing and flew him into the altar. The 5-colored rainbow light that filled the entire secret room condensed into a huge ball of light that enveloped him like a cocoon. He had a bad premonition, and he desperately erupted with strength to struggle. However, the cocoon formed by the 5-colored rainbow light was extremely tough. Even if he swung his broken sword and cut open a crack in the cocoon would immediately heal and suppress him even more violently. Finally, he was enveloped by the 5-colored rainbow light and flew into the 10,000 Gu altar. Swoosh! The 10,000 Gu altar swallowed him, and he was suppressed inside the altar, in a mysterious space filled with 5-colored rainbow light. This was the inner space of the 10,000 Gu altar, and it was isolated from the outside world. Unless Ji Tianqing could break the 10,000 Gu altar, there was no way he could escape. The 5-colored rainbow light enveloped him, and no matter how he struggled, he could not break free. There was no way he could escape from the 10,000 Gu altar, only death awaited him. Moreover, the 5-colored rainbow light was a powerful Gu Dao divine power, and it was constantly corroding his body, devouring his magic power and soul power. Inside the 5-colored light ball, his strength was rapidly being devoured, and his struggle became weaker and weaker. Soon, he was completely suppressed by the 10,000 Gu altar. At this time, Long Zitian's figure appeared, and he stood at the top of the altar with a pale face, panting heavily. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.